Jason Detrick checking in.
Affirmative, and you came in loud and clear, so connection's good.
Thank you.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The City Council is reconvening from closed session and going to go ahead and adjourn the special meeting of the City Council at 6 p.m. And at this time, I want to go ahead and call the City Council to order for the Elk Grove regular City Council meeting on Wednesday, August the 26th at 6 p.m. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. Consistent with Executive Order N-29-20 and N-35-20 issued by the Governor of the State of California, this meeting will be conducted by teleconference only. The meeting location will be the City Council chamber, but it will not be open to the public. The meeting of the Elk Grove City Council will be replayed on Metro Cable Channel 14 on Friday, August 28th at 1 p.m. and Tuesday, September 1st at 6 p.m. It is being closed captioned and will be webcast at sacmetrocable.tv. City Council meeting videos are also archived on the city's website at elkgrovecity.org. For members of the participating audience who may have personal electronic devices, please place them on silent mode during the meeting or on mute when you are not speaking. Elk Grove City Council welcomes, appreciates, and encourages participation in the City Council meeting. City Council requests that you limit your presentation to 3 minutes per person so that all present will have time to participate. City Council reserves the right to reasonably limit the total time for public comment on any particular noticed agenda item as it may deem necessary. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2010-24, no individual speaker concerning public comment may address the City Council for more than 3 minutes. City Clerk will run a speaker timer, and after the first 2 minutes have passed, the City Clerk will state on the audio feed 1 minute remaining, indicating 1 minute remains to summarize comments. With that, Mayor, that'll take us on, if we're prepared, for the roll call.
Roll call, please.
For the roll call, Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Hume.
Here.
Councilmember Suen.
Here. Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Thank you.
That's all right. That's part of our process, making sure all of our systems are working. Vice Mayor Detrick.
Here.
And Mayor Lee.
I am here. All right, let's move to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Mayor, this is John Hobbs, your city attorney. You may have said it, but I don't think I heard it. I think there's nothing to report from closed session?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Hobbs. For the record, there is nothing to report from closed session. Thank you, sir. And 1.2 is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Clerk, if you could raise a flag, and wherever you are at, please address the United States flag, and you could join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, folks. And next item is 1.3, a moment of silence. The City Council would like to invite members of the public to join us in a moment of silence at the beginning of every regular City Council meeting. So if you could join us, please.
Mr. Mayor, I would like
Yes.
to ask that we hold this moment of silence in honor of Howard Seiner, who is a longtime involved community member and former Old Town Association member, as well as I believe he's on our Historic Preservation Committee.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Hume. Anyone else? All right. Join members of the public. Would you join the City Council in a moment of silence, please? Thank you very much. Let's move to the next item.
That'll take us on to section 2, approval of the agenda.
Members,
Motion.
got a motion?
Second.
There's a second. Roll call, please.
And that roll call vote, Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilmember Hume.
Aye.
Councilmember Suen.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Detrick.
Yes.
And Mayor Lee.
Yes.
With a 5-0 vote, that'll approve the agenda. That'll move us on to section 3, our closed session. There are no closed session items on the regular agenda, so that will advance us to section 4, our presentations and announcements, starting with item 4.1, which is a proclamation recognizing September 2020 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Right. I'd like to extend an invitation to the members. If any of you would like to read the proclamation.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilmember Suen.
Yeah, I would, but I got to switch to my
No problem. You can.
switching my
Go
view.
ahead.
If you could just give me a second.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead and take 4.1? Is there another council member that would like to take 4.2, recognition of volunteers of the Great Plates program?
I'll take 4.2. This is Councilmember Hume.
Thank you, Councilmember Hume. Whenever you're
Thank
ready.
you for lining
Councilmember
those up. It's sorry, Mr. Mayor. It also gives us some time to patch through our callers who are coming in on these items. And so for 4.1, it's giving us the opportunity to have them patched in.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Councilmember Suen.
Yeah, thank you. And just this actually has little bit greater meaning for me this year. Had a friend who passed away from this disease last month. So I just want to highlight the importance of not only getting screened, but when there is something found, that you follow up with that treatment and you take it seriously. So with that, since folks are listening, I'm just going to quickly read the whereases. Whereas prostate cancer is the most frequently diagnosed cancer in men and second leading cause of cancer deaths in men. And whereas the American Cancer Society estimates that 20,160 men in California will be diagnosed with prostate cancer this year, and estimated that 3,890 California men will die from the disease. And whereas the 5-year survival rate approaches 100% when prostate cancer is diagnosed and treated early, it does drop to 31% when it spreads to other parts of the body. And whereas treatment options for prostate cancer vary depending on age, stage, and grade of the cancer, as well as effects of other existing medical conditions, and the American Cancer Society recommends that men should have an opportunity to make an informed decision about whether to be tested for prostate cancer based on their personal values and preferences. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Elk Grove hereby proclaims September 2020 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Elk Grove, and asks the community to increase awareness about the importance for men to make an informed decision about with their healthcare provider about early detection and testing for prostate cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sun. And I just wanted to highlight that I can't imagine anyone going through that process, but each and every one of us has somehow been touched either through a friend, coworker with cancer. And so thank you for reading that. And Councilmember Hume.
Before we go on to 4.2, Jason, did we have anyone on the line to comment on 4.1? Are you on mute and trying to respond or not able to respond?
I'm on mute, so thank you, Councilmember
There we
Hume.
go.
We do have a caller, Mr. Raleigh Swingle. He has been at the council chambers for quite a few years, for the past few years, to accept this item, and I believe we're making the connection with him, and we'll patch him through soon. But thank you for that. Sorry.
That's why I wanted to pause, because I was hoping we did, and I would be concerned if we didn't. So,
thank you, Councilmember Hume. Thank you, Jason.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Mr. Swingle. You're coming through loud and clear. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank you again this year. I'm back for this declaration, and reading all of the line items that are in the declaration are very important. And as most of you know, because I've been coming back for quite a few years, prostate cancer is a very important part of my life. I was diagnosed in January of 2004 with stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer with a very poor diagnosis. However, through the treatment I've been receiving at UC Davis Comprehensive Cancer Center, I have now survived that stage 4 cancer for over 16 years and doing quite well. I won't go through all of the figures that were already led, but I'd like to just tell you what I went through in the last year, if you don't mind. It won't take long. In August of 2019, my PSA had gone up to around 30, and it was then determined that I should have to go on some other form of program. And I was offered 5 different programs at Davis, and we went through them with my oncologist, and we determined that the one I should probably take is called Radium-223, also called Xofigo, Xofigo. If you ever get bored being sequestered in the house, you can look it up. Anyway, Radium-223 is a radioactive isotope, and once a month for 6 months, I got an infusion of this radioactive isotope, and the purpose was to go to the lesions, the cancer lesions in my bones, and see if they can reduce the activity. Well, after 6 months, in February, they did a bone scan, a CT scan, and a complete blood workup. The bone scan showed that all of the lesions in my body were less active. CT scan, I do not have any soft tissue cancer, and that showed up. And my PSA went from 30 down to 6.6, which is the lowest PSA reading I have had in 16 years. So it was a wonderful treatment, and it's been 6 months since then. And I just had a 6-month follow-up, and my bone scan and CT scan were unchanged, but my PSA is elevating. My PSA is just a number in my case, so we're just not doing anything at all. We're just kind of waiting, and I'll be going back probably every month and do a blood test to see if, well, not if, but when the PSA gets to a level that we're going to have to do something else. And the other thing that they're doing now at UC Davis is they're doing what they call genome testing. They're taking your DNA and they can look at it, and if there's any irregularities in the DNA, they can pinpoint them and then attack. It tells them how to attack the cancer. And because my cancer is in my bones, they can't do a biopsy of the bone. So they do something new now. They call it a liquid biopsy. They take your blood and get the DNA from your blood and then analyze it from there. So that's where I am right now. I really want to thank you for these this declaration and proclamation, and because all of them, we get several hundred from the state of California, from various cities and municipalities. They're sent to our congresspeople with the hope that they will continue to fund research for prostate cancer. And it's worked in the past, and we're hoping that it'll do it again, and they'll continue to give funding for the research, because that is so important. That's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
Mr. Swingle, thank you so much. I look forward to this proclamation so much every year, because I get to see you, and since I've been on this council and we've had this, I've always remembered you, and we always say we'll see you next year. So I look forward to seeing you next year.
I will do everything in my power to be back.
Mr. Swingle, this is Councilmember Soon. I just want to echo Councilmember Wynn's comments. Very, very fortunate that everything turned out well for you, and hope that continued good wishes to you in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Swingle, this is Mayor Lee. It's good to hear your voice. It's good to hear that you're here this year, and looking forward to seeing you next year.
Like I said, I'll do everything I can to come back.
Mr. Swingle, you're an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Raleigh. This is Pat. Everything you can has been working for 16 years, so just keep it up.
I'm planning on it.
I know.
And again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll somehow get together so I can pick up the proclamation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next item, 4.2, which is presentation of recognition to the volunteers of the Great Plates program. Councilmember Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I read the proclamation here, I just want to also call out, in addition to the volunteers and organizations codified in this resolution, I'd also like to give a shout out to Paratransit Inc., on whose board Councilmember Wynn and I both sit, who were instrumental in stepping up to help get these meals delivered to these homebound seniors. So with that, the City of Elk Grove recognizes and appreciates the Great Plates Delivered program, with special recognition to the Great Plates volunteers. Whereas the City of Elk Grove joined the State of California's Great Plates Delivered program in May as one of 36 participating cities and counties. And whereas the city was able to plan and implement the program within 10 days and has served over 560 participants during the past 3 months, with over 430 currently being served each day. And whereas volunteers stepped up quickly to assist with deliveries, call center duties, and most importantly, connecting with our seniors who are participating in this program, and whereas the individuals who have volunteered to support Great Plates have included many of our volunteers in police services, the VIPs, city staff spending time on weekends, staff from the Cosumnes Community Services District and the Elk Grove Unified School District, showing a strong commitment to support our community, and whereas the Great Plates Volunteers has donated over 527 hours of service delivering food and answering calls for the Great Plates Delivered program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Elk Grove hereby recognizes and celebrates the many volunteers who have supported and continue to support the city in the implementation of the Great Plates Delivered program and pays tribute to the dedication to service, commitment, and compassion shown by the Great Plates Volunteers. Signed this 26th day of August, 2020.
Thank you, Councilmember Hume. Molly Patterson, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lee and City Council, not only for this recognition, but for the opportunity to serve the Elk Grove community through the Great Plates Delivered program. The meals were delivered by over 60 city staff members, volunteers, and community partners who donated over 527 hours of service, which speaks to the inspiring level of engagement within this community. On behalf of all who served on this program, I thank you for this recognition.
Molly, please extend a deep, warm thank you to all of those who volunteer for the Great Plates program. The work that you guys have done has made a tremendous difference. I've heard from a number of seniors out there, and this is, our community coming together. And I'm just so thankful that there are people like you that's willing to step up during this difficult time. Council members?
Yes, Ms. Patterson, thank you. I know quite a few families and individuals that have really benefited from this, and they've shared with me how much this made a difference in their life, especially during this time. So I echo the mayor's words. Thank you so much, because you truly are impacting a huge part of our community here, and making sure that they are fed, which is very important. And without you and the volunteers in this program here, I don't know what would happen. And so thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, this is Vice Mayor Detrick. I want to thank you as well. In the spirit of giving is more valuable than the given than receiving. So with you taking the time to give is what makes our community as great as it is. And thank you and everybody who's helped volunteer on this program.
Yeah, thank you. This is Councilmember Hume. Thank you for stepping up and help coordinate the volunteers. And I also want to thank staff for their remarkable turnaround time of seizing this opportunity to implement this program. Out of 36 cities in the state of California, we were one of the few who did so. And I also this is one of those rare synergies where we were obviously able to take care of those with needs in our community, including the restaurants and businesses who stepped up and were able to maybe help get through these trying times by doing their part to provide such a valuable and needed service. So thank you to everyone that was involved.
Molly, this is Councilmember Hume. I want to echo Councilmember Hume. This is Councilmember Soon. I want to echo Councilmember Hume's and my other colleagues' comments and just say thank you very much. It's a win-win program benefiting the businesses and our residents. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. And let's move to the next item.
That'll take us on to item 4.3, which is the Arts Commission Annual Update.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Lana Yoshimura, Community Event Center Manager and the Staff Liaison to the Arts Commission. We're very pleased to present our annual report this evening that was pre-recorded by our chair, Nan Mahan. She is also on the line to answer any questions you may have, but if you could please play the video, that would be fantastic.
Here we go.
Good evening, Mayor Lee, members of the City Council. My name is Nan Mahan, and I'm the chairperson for the Elk Grove Arts Commission. I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners. That would be Cheryl Grice, Vice Chair, Sally Guttridge, Recorder, Liz Irons, and Leslie Sandifer, Commissioners. Also, our staff members, Lana Yoshimura and Carrie Monte. They are the ones who do all the heavy lifting for us, and we appreciate them very much. Our 2019 and 2020 accomplishments have been a little bit in disarray, but we have managed to do quite a bit. We've updated the commission resolution. We've worked with the percentage for the arts program to bring visual arts to the community. We planned several special events, and we've been involved in community engagement. To update our resolution, which had not been updated since its inception when the city was first formed, we conducted a workshop to discuss our current roles and responsibilities in September 2019. We updated our resolution to reflect the Commission's growing role in performing arts and culture in the community. This new resolution was adopted by the City Council on May 13th, 2020. The percentage for the arts program helped us to unveil public art at District 56 and at the new animal shelter. The arts dedications at District 56 included art that depicted all the art forms, literary, visual, performing. And we have, of course, the main entry cloud that changes colors at night, and it's very is quite an eye catcher if you're driving down Elk Grove Boulevard. The most popular one probably, however, is the animal shelter artwork, which is a whimsical kind of fantasy animal sculptures that the people seem to be very attracted to. Our commissioners have also served on art review panels for these particular parks that are being constructed in Elk Grove. The finalists have been selected for each project, and their proposals will be reviewed by the panel in early September. The percentage for the arts program, music sculpture, the final piece for the Avenue of Arts. Our visual arts accomplishments include the music sculpture, which will soon be ready. It is not in place yet. It is ready. It's not in place yet. It's awaiting a foundation. It'll be the final piece for the Avenue of the Arts. And it also will be an astonishing piece. Our special events that we were very proud of took a lot of time and thought to form them have been postponed due to the COVID-19 virus. They will include the Peace and Love musical, the Iris Awards, and a new event, the Book Fair. We want this to be a major event that will feature authors, present writing workshops, and allow authors to meet the public and sell their books. We will plan for new dates for those events. Currently, we're working on, under the handicap of the COVID-19, we are trying to work on special events, a music series. We're working to develop this music series for the community within the current public health guidelines. So stay tuned to what formula we come up with for that one. Our community engagement, in which all of our commissioners are taking part in, include a Laguna Creek Trail mural, a city co-sponsored grants review, and the Linda May Mann Lima Foundation Scholarship, which our commissioners will be part of the student selection for that scholarship. So we're hoping for new and better and innovative things to happen for us in the arts and culture in Elk Grove in the coming year. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nan. Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions.
I have a
but-
question.
Councilmember
Actually, I
Sue.
have a question. Go ahead. Yeah,
Go
just Nan, it's great to see you at least on video and recording, and really want to thank the commission for all their work. Laguna Creek Trail mural, how's that coming along?
The Laguna Creek Trail is actually coming along very well. We're looking at organizing an event where both students and a professional artist can partner for this. So that's where we're at now. Is we'll be doing a call for artists and selecting an artist who can lead students in what we want to happen out there.
That's a great idea, engaging the students on that. Just want to thank you all again for adding flavor, some flavor to our city.
Well, it's our passion, you know.
Nan, this is Mary Lee. I just wanted to kind of highlight what Councilmember Swin says, which is really adding some flavor and some, quality art to our community. And what better individuals to leave it to than the commissioners who actually have good taste in art. So thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
And I've enjoyed, Miss Nan, I've enjoyed going through District 56 and looking at all the arts, and having my children also looking at it as well too, and thinking what it looks like on certain days and certain times and whatnot. And so I truly appreciate you and the rest of the commissioners for putting some flavor into our city here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for helping us with this and for allowing us to do, giving us free reign, basically. Thank you for that.
Nan, this is Vice Mayor Detrick, and really appreciate all that you do personally as well as the entire Arts Commission. That one of the complaints for years that we had is not having enough culture here in Elk Grove, and these are the small steps that we're making, but we're starting to see collectively really starting to add up, and really appreciate everything you do. And it saddens me to not be able to see some of the shows that you've put together in the past that have been postponed.
Well, they're all online, so one can always watch the last one we did online. But the one we have coming up is my favorite. It's going to be a terrific show if we are ever able to produce it.
Well, I'm sure you'll get it done sooner or later, and I want to make sure if I'm not on the council at that point, I still want to invite.
Certainly. You've always been there, and I will always look for you in the audience.
Thank you, Nan.
All right, anyone else? Good. All right, thank you, Nan. All right, let's move to the next item.
And sorry, I've got a resident that wanted to address the arts, but we'll see if we can incorporate them here on general public comment, which is our next section that we're moving into. And for the section 5 of public comment, participating members, the viewing audience, may comment on any item not on the agenda that is of interest to the public and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes or less if a large number of requests are received on a particular subject. City Council cannot take action on non-agendized items raised under public comment until the matter has been specifically included on an agenda as an action item. Members of the public desiring a response to a specific question are encouraged to contact any member of the council or the city manager at any time. Those participating members who wish to address a specific agendized item are encouraged to offer their public comments during consideration of that item. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, for our general public comment today, earlier a pre-recorded message with an accompanying photo was distributed to the full city council. Where we stand right now is I've got, I believe, 11 folks signed up to speak during general public comment that'll be dialing in, and we'll start pulling those in as staff are able to make them available. And one of those speakers, they did submit written comments along with the other items that they'll be commenting on, and that was distributed out to the council and staff as we were able to. But we'll see if we can pull in our first caller under Section 5, General Public Comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Hi, you may go ahead.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor Lee and council members. I'm Maisu. On July 22nd, many of us called into the city council meetings to voice our concerns regarding false allegations about the Hmong familiar clan system. On August 12th, as we called in to voice our concerns for item 10.4, we were singled out and limited to a 1-minute public comment time because it was an inconvenience for the 4 council members to hear our concerns. You really need to do your job. So I'm here again tonight to read all of my comments for the record. The action that you took to limit item 10.4 public comment time is outrageous, inconsiderate, and insulting. You cannot silence us. We are exercising our First Amendment rights as Americans, the freedom of speech. We are residents of Elk Grove, voters who called to voice our opinion about the Hmong as Hmong Americans, but yet this is Diversity Month in Elk Grove, a place where you proudly proclaim no place for hate, and our voices were dismissed by the 4 city council members because we're not elected. We have been called attack dogs and accused of victim shaming by school board member Bobby Singh Allen without a comprehensive understanding of our culture and our community. Bobby Singh Allen grossly mischaracterized our family system as one that is used to control and silence women. She further incites hate towards the Hmong community to protesting, posting such quotes as, "A lion doesn't lose sleep over opinions of sheep." Bobby Singh Allen's insufferable arrogance and ignorance has put the Hmong people in harm's way. At a previous school board meeting, many of the comments were not read for public record. Our voices continue to be suppressed. As elected officials, why is it that Bobby Singh Allen and Jacqueline Marino are not being held accountable for their bigotry and racism? Yet they try to deflect it by playing the woman victim card. The patterns of behavior for you council members are hypocritical. Pat Hume and Steve Dietrich committed violations in which they were found culpable and fined. Steve Dietrich committed the same ethics violation twice. Neither Hume or Dietrich were ever censored. It's quite clear the 4 of you council members are always trying to undermine Mayor Lee. You 4 voted to get rid of the full-time mayor's assistant, ran Darren Stewart against Mayor Lee, opposed by-district elections, opposed moratorium on evictions during the pandemic, and tried to get rid of a directly elected mayor position. Please try to restore any amount of respect and humanity you may still have. Tell Bobby Singh Allen and her cronies to take their grievances on the campaign trail. Do not let these political shenanigans continue in the council chambers any longer, and stop wasting our tax dollars. And if you haven't realized, we are in the middle of a pandemic where people are losing their jobs, small businesses are closed. The tax dollars that you're wasting here should go to Elk Grove residents and to open our businesses back up. But instead, you voted to send these shenanigans to a grand jury, waste more than tax dollars, when you know for a fact that there has been no criminal action found on Mayor Lee.
10 seconds.
These are unsubstantiated allegations.
Time still remains for the speaker. Now it's coming up.
Thank you, Jason, for clarifying that. And I apologize, ma'am. I had misunderstood that Mr. Lindgren had indicated that your time is up. But thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
And that'll conclude our speaker. Our staff will be pulling up our next caller that we can connect to. We do put out there for folks that have called in advance to be pulled into the meeting, please do have your phones available. Be ready to answer the phone as we call out.
You're patched in. Okay, 1 second. Caller, you may go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Lynn Wheat. Councilmember Hume once said that water is the new gold. Like him, I believe that to be true. And so for the past 2 years, I've attended the Sacramento Groundwater Authority meetings held at our City Hall. I spoke up during those meetings requesting that residents of Elk Grove be made aware of the meetings and the development of our groundwater sustainability plan, as we all will be participants of the plan, and most likely the plan will determine how much water we receive and how much it will cost. I was pleased to finally see our city newsletter acknowledge the plan and provide a website for our residents. I hope that our city will continue to promote attendance and participation in this process. I suggest to catch our residents' attention, you may want to show a water meter, water bill, or a well site. Again, thank you for beginning a process of transparency. Good night.
And thank you for your comments. We'll be pulling in our next available commenter under Section 5, General Public Comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. I just want to first thank all the city staff. I didn't get a chance to thank you guys last time I called in since I was limited to 1 minute. First off, good evening to the mayor and all the city council. I just want to start off by saying really shame on the council for limiting us to 1 minute last time. This is once again another moment where you chose not to listen to the people, the folks of Elk Grove. Shame on you all. I just wanted to reiterate a couple points I didn't get to make, and then finish up. You know, when you put yourself out there publicly, and then you get comments from random online trolls, and then you associate that with the mayor based on nothing other than race, that's racist. And then when you take that another further step and then blame an entire culture, that's really racist. And, you know, for Stephanie Nguyen, Councilwoman, and the rest of the council members to actually chastise the mayor for the public outcry that happened, 100 callers calling in, that's not the mayor's fault. He didn't do that. You guys did. You were the ones that put that ridiculous item on the city council agenda. You should be chastising yourselves. And then yet you didn't even listen to us. You didn't respond to a single one of us, didn't even acknowledge us. In fact, you acknowledged the 6 or 7 phone calls that did work out to your own agenda. You even, by item, responded to them. I mean, you may call that collusion. I don't know if I can go so far, but it did sound like you guys were working hand in hand. I just want you guys to take accountability, not like what you were trying to do with the censure of the mayor, where you're asking him to take accountability of strangers.
1 minute remains.
You to take accountability, yes, for your own actions. By giving credence to these racist allegations, you guys have done harm to the Hmong community. I would ask that you go ahead and do some research, maybe do a poll, maybe do some town hall meetings to discover how much damage you've done, and maybe work with some city staff to figure out a way to remedy what you've done. As the mayor suggested, some cultural sensitivity training for a lot of you sounds like a good idea, but seems like you all need a whole lot more work. And while we're on the topic, if we're talking about harassment, there's a serious, serious problem with elected officials, campaign staffers, and a certain news editor-in-chief using their powers to abuse private citizens and slandering them, libel, written statements, putting them out there. That's true abuse. When you're an elected official and you have the power of the media at your hand.
Time is up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That'll take us to our next speaker on general public comment. It's about our 4th speaker, and we've had some folks sign up, so we're at about a dozen, but we've been through 4 of them, just to give folks kind of a sense of where we are in the process.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Hello. Buenas noches. My name is Alejandro Gutierrez Duncan. I'm running for the Grove City Council District 3. There is a common sentiment in our city, and I hope this November 3rd it reflects that. However, tonight, I would like to request the City Council to adopt a resolution that celebrates National Latino Hispanic Heritage Month. Each year, Americans observe National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15 to October 15 by celebrating the history, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central, and South America. The observation started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Johnson and was expanded by President Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period starting on September 15 and ending on October 15. It was enacted into law on August 17, 1988. September 15 is a historically significant day that marks the anniversary of independence of 5 Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. The designated period is also a note to those from Mexico and Chile, which celebrate their independence on September 16 and September 18, respectively. This year, 32 million Hispanics and Latinos will be eligible to vote. The city of El Grove has 27,581 Hispanic or Latino population. According to the U.S. Census government, we, Latinos, make 18% of the entire population of El Grove. It is about time to embrace and organize events that recognize our identity and makes the city of El Grove one of the most diverse cities in the country. I urge, as I am not there yet, the City Council to adopt a resolution that recognizes Latino Hispanic Heritage Month starting September 15 to October 15. This way, we can recognize, organize events, and celebrate the identity of many Latino Americans in our city. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
And I believe that concluded the comments. That'll take on to our next speaker under Section 5 for public comment. And staff's just making that connection and then patching them through into our teleconference environment. We appreciate everyone's patience as we move through this process.
As I am not there yet, the City Council to adopt
That sounds like a replay that someone might have on the background. Don't forget to mute any other devices that might be in the background as you're patched through into the calls. It helps to put other computers that might be streaming the meeting onto mute. And likewise, if you're using cell phones, don't use speaker phones. It can cause some feedback out there. And all those elements will give us the best, clearest quality to hear the call coming through.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is Paul Lindley, longtime resident of Elk Grove. Mr. Lee, at the City Council's last meeting, I called for you to resign as the mayor of the city of Elk Grove. I made that statement in response to your actions towards prominent women in our community. At that meeting, the City Council members found your actions to be so egregious that they felt compelled to forward a complaint to the Sacramento County Grand Jury. In reaching that determination, each member was clearly critical of your actions and chose to rebuke you for them. Since then, you've lost the endorsement of your own political party. Both the police and firefighters unions have endorsed your opponent. Over 11,600 people have signed a petition demanding your resignation on change.org, and I would note a number of which are among dissent. And the Sacramento Bee published a scathing editorial on August 18th, headlined, "Does Elk Grove's Mayor Need a Third Term?" They concluded the editorial with these words: "His blanket apology to those who say they've been victimized by his behavior in office illustrates a serious weakness in his leadership ability. A person caught up in such a maelstrom of credible accusations does not seem like the best candidate for a third 2-year term as mayor of Elk Grove. If anyone needs to step aside from public life, it's Steve Lee, not Bobby Singh Allen. Lee should think about whether running a re-election campaign while apologizing for harassment and facing a grand jury investigation is what's best for Elk Grove. Clearly, The Bees editorial was also calling for your resignation. So tonight I repeat my call. Show us that you can put Elk Grove ahead of your own narrow self-interest. Do the right thing for Elk Grove. Resign. Thank you.
That concluded the speaker's comments. We'll be pulling in our next speaker signed up under section 5 of our public comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Graham, Elk Grove. First thing, I think that you should have a timer that's visible to those of us that are calling in for public comments. If we are following the City Council meeting online, we should be able to see that, and we'll know how much time we have left. Please do that. Now, yesterday, Jeff Warner sent an email out to myself and those of us that participated in the community meeting conference call on August 10th regarding cell antenna permitting, and especially the 2 cell antennas that the City Council approved at public schools. And so for the first time ever, the city has made a list and put it up on the city's website of the nearest address to each of the proposed or approved cell antenna sites. First time ever. And you probably remember December 11 was the date that the council approved the master license agreement with Verizon, and August 28th of last year, almost a year ago, is the date that the council approved the master license agreement with AT&T. So finally, it's up there. Now, also, I want to tell you, and what you should do, council, now is send out a paper letter in the mail to notify every person living within 500 feet of each of these addresses that the city has identified on its website to tell them that there's been an application and the city is considering approving a cell antenna site at that place and close to their house. And you should tell them what the permitting process is, how they can have input into it, to whom they could write, and so on. All right. Councilmember Darren Suen, at the November 28, 2018 community workshop, you were talking about transparency, and you said citizens should know the benefits and they should know the risks. I agree. And you said having that transparency during the application process would give folks an opportunity to learn what we all learned tonight. Thank you very much. Now, Councilmember Suen, is this what you had in mind? That finally, 1 year later, the city would finally publicize the addresses of these approved cell antenna sites? I don't think that's what you had in mind.
1 minute remains.
Also, there's been some correspondence between the Elk Grove Unified School District and the City of Elk Grove regarding those things. Kim Williams, June 2nd, to Jeff Warner. The proposed small cell tower on Bighorn is right next to a 2-story classroom building. She says, so if the EMFs are stronger at the antenna level, it could be problematic for the students in the classrooms on the 2nd story. It appears that the antenna would be less than 50 feet from the classroom. She later writes that the school district is considering, she says, I believe there's a good possibility that the district will request the one close to Laguna Creek High School science classroom building be located elsewhere. Now, apparently the district did make that request. And finally, on July 20th, Jeff Warner wrote back to Kim Williams and said that he had met with AT&T. They had conversation about possibility of moving that cell antenna, and AT&T had agreed to move that one away, but not the one at Monterey Trail High School. So the point is, the city should take into consideration schools and proximity to schools and the effect on education of every cell antenna, not only the ones that are currently approved in the master license agreement, but also all the ones that could be or will be approved in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Members copies of this correspondence with the Elk Grove School District, and I ask you
Time is up, Mr. Graham.
Please read it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
And staff will be pulling up our next caller under section 5 of our public comment. And again, for any of those folks that did sign up at some point with myself to speak under section 5 of our public comment, please make sure your phone's open and receiving phone calls so that we can make those connections and patch you through into the meeting.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Marie Vu. Tonight, I'm going to be raising an awareness or speaking on behalf of the issue that I've seen in Elk Grove, the issue of racism. Time and time again, we see on the news citizens in the city of Elk Grove assaulted or threatened because of their race. City elected officials have failed to address this matter. Today, the Hmong community's voices on the scheme and Trustee Singh Allen made to generalize a culture she has no knowledge of has fell on deaf ears. Elk Grove officials, they are walking on a very dangerous path. Your fail to acknowledge and address the racism in this city is appalling. Your lack of action is noticeable. In 2015, the Sikh community was targeted post 9/11. In 2018, Dream Girl Hair Salon was racially targeted. KKK was spray painted on an Elk Grove apartment complex, and 2 Pleasant Grove high school freshmen racism went viral. In 2020, elected official Trustee Singh Allen targeted the Hmong community. Nothing, and I'll say it again, nothing has been done about it. City of Elk Grove's statement on racism, discrimination, and hate states, the City of Elk Grove rejects, discourages, and condemns racism, discrimination, and any hate-based conduct. In 2016, Elk Grove City Council passed a proclamation that declared Elk Grove has no place for hate. I have yet to see any elected officials in Elk Grove stand up to take action. The voices of the people have fell on deaf ears. It is time to wake up and address the problem of racism in the community or get the hell out. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And that'll take us on to our next speaker, still under Section 5, or general public comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. How Elk Grove Mayor Steve Lee, L-Y, wants to be Steve Lee, L-E-E. These are comments that I've titled as such that were originally made by a professor of English at Fresno State, Mai Der Vang. This particular type of Hmong man, like Elk Grove Mayor Steve Lee, also embodies patriotic pro-assimilationist tendencies. In other words, he is someone who might seek social validation from the mainstream. These tendencies manifest as a form of subservience and colonized loyalty to white people. When I, that is Mai Der Vang, thinks about the notion of colonized loyalty, I'm reminded of the war, of how the United States feared the domino spread of communism during the Vietnam War, leading the CIA to covertly enlist tens of thousands of Hmong men and boys in northern Laos to fight on its behalf in what became known as the Secret War. Starting in the mid-50s and more actively throughout the 1960s, Hmong soldiers gathered intelligence, rescued downed U.S. pilots, and severed the transport supplies along the Ho Chi Minh Trail amongst a host of other guerrilla activity. All of this happened in spite of international agreements established in Geneva in 1954 and reaffirmed in 1962, asserting that Laos remained a neutral state. This clandestine war not only then functioned as a devious workaround to these neutrality laws, but it also saved the United States the necessity of seeking its own soldiers to serve on Laotian ground. I think about how that is Mai Der Vang thinks, about how some people in my community still fail to see this war for what it was. And in fact, people in the white community, a proxy war in which the United States used Hmong people to do its bidding in order to spare American lives while circumventing neutrality agreements.
1 minute remains.
Okay, Hmong people no longer served a purpose to the United States and were quickly discarded to fight or flee on their own without a chance for resettlement until many years later. I believe that the foofara over Mr. Lee and the other politicos who are involved in trying to understand harassment need to take these political conditions of our past political conditions into effect. And I found great value in Mai Der Vang's notes, which have been forwarded to the council along with her a link to her full article. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, speaker. That'll take us on to pulling in our next speaker on the list. and our staff are pulling folks in, dialing out to them in order to make the connection. And then we patch you through into the meeting. And here in this segment of Section 5, our general public comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff for taking my call this evening. Diane Satran here regarding permit 19-07227. The Brown Act requires the city to take action and deliberate openly. It says the people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. As soon as I learned of this issue, March of 2020, I've been very proactive and diligently asking the city to provide specific information to the public, the residents of Elk Grove. I provided each member of the council a very detailed letter of very specific requests. The city continues to selectively choose what they want to provide to the public. Going back to November 28, 2018, Councilman Simmons' directions to the city staff were clear directions for transparency during the application process. The city continues to not be completely transparent in this process. I've been advocating the issue since the moment I learned about it. As you can see, I'm not giving up. I appreciate the fact that the city has provided some information on the city's small cell telecommunications website, but I do not appreciate the fact that the city has not addressed all of my concerns and continues to only respond to certain requests and questions I've raised regarding this matter. It took the city over 2 months to complete one of my PRA requests. June 9th was when I submitted the request, and I did not receive a response until August 17th. I probably would not have received it unless I probably only received it because I pushed the issue on it. Thank you for finally posting the recording of the August 10th Medina Way residential neighborhood meeting. I've not had a chance to review the video, but I do want to address my request for a follow-up citywide meeting. Again, it's a citywide issue, not a Medina Way issue.
1 minute remains.
Hold a follow-up meeting in possibly late October, early November. This will allow me to review the hundreds of pages I've received from the city per my PRA request, and also a viewing of the August 10th video recording. I will be following up with a letter once I have a chance to review the video recording as well. I've compared my May 18th letter request regarding the city's webpage, and the city has not done a lot of things. A statement of the current status of this application, which the city will update each time there is a change in that status. This is the same question that Mayor Lee asked Mr. Murdoch to brief the council on at the city meeting on May 13th. The city has not done this. A phone number, name, email address of the person at the city who are reviewing the application and to whom a resident can send written comments to about the application review process. The city partially did this. They provided Public Works and Planning Department phone numbers, but no point of contact, name or email address. The deadline is any. Thank you for your time, council members, mayor, vice mayor. Take care and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
And staff is reaching out. I think our list, we have 3 more folks that are signed up here on general public comment under section 5 of our agenda. And
Caller,
staff,
you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes. You can go ahead now.
and it sounds like our staff have a connection. We're just trying to patch them through.
We've got it. You can go ahead, caller.
So I just want to say that the August 12th Elk Grove City Council meeting was a sham. If you don't want to listen to the public, why are you sitting in the city council seat? You gave an excuse that, oh, there's parents ready to put their kids in bed for school the next day. There are callers that were working 12-hour shifts waiting, and they were willing to wait 3 hours to get their time to speak. So I don't care what happened to the outcome of the mayoral race, but you're there to listen to the people. I know some of you were like, some of you were appointed, so you don't care about the voice of the people, but you are going to be up for re-election. So keep that in mind.
I'm not Hmong. I don't live in Chinese in Elk Grove. I'm Chinese. I didn't intend to come to this meeting tonight. I wrote a letter to the school board and it was ignored. And I tried to come to speak last week and my time was cut. So I just want to say that I'm voicing my concern on Bobby St. Allen's language against the Hmong people, and it's hurting people in the community. Instead of saying, hey, I want to listen to you, and what can I do to mend it? I'm getting attacked again. I'm getting attacked by Stevie. Mayor Lee hasn't said anything. Mayor Lee doesn't control us. We don't know him. I don't know him. I'm not speaking on his behalf. The trend is for avid supporters and Elk Grove Tribune to delete our comments and block us. In her Facebook announcing that she's going to run for city mayor seat, Bobby said, everyone has a seat at my table. Does this include everyone that's simply balking her, that's voicing comments? What are you going to do when you're in City Hall and the mayor's seat, Bobby? Are you going to like cry someone's attacking me because they question you or voice their criticism? That's not leadership. That's hiding, that's scapegoating, and that's a cop-out. That's all.
Okay, next speaker.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Well, hello, Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Detrick, and City Council members. This is a familiar voice to you. This is Sharon Anderson, and I'm speaking about the Arts Commission item and some ideas. Sorry I missed the public comment for that item. Listen, my biking group uses our city's newer sculptures as some of our most treasured destinations. We always talk about riding to the Acorn, riding to the cow in Machado Dairy Park. We absolutely love what's been going on and would love to see a way for our older parks to include arts pieces and sculptures. So we thank the city, the commission, and the CSD for all of that. The other thing I wanted to mention was the mural for the Laguna Creek Trail. I'm wondering if there's a point in time where we could join forces with the city's Trails Committee when there's the unveiling or, some celebration, because we always celebrate in Elk Grove, which I like. So I would just recommend that. And then finally, an idea for the future with the Arts Commission, and I'm hoping somebody on staff is still listening and maybe can tee this up with the commission, is we've got a lot of concrete bridge walls and barriers that are just kind of plain vanilla, and they could certainly use some beautification. We have a lot of construction projects going on within the city that probably have excess tile and all sorts of pieces that could be stockpiled somewhere and maybe made into mural walls on our concrete bridges, because we've got creek crossings and all kinds of opportunities. So just kind of put that in the think tank and see if it comes to fruition as far as continuing to beautify our wonderful city. And that was it. Any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
And I think this is our final speaker that we have under Section 5, general public comment.
Caller, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Dr. Firdaus Sheikh. I'm here to speak for those 3 minutes that I was deprived of. I speak today as 5 women attack the dignity of Elk Grove. Elk Grove is consumed by these 5 women spewing venomous toxins as they gang up in a blind hate campaign, completely shocking the otherwise calm town that I have personally enjoyed for the last 30 years. Steve Lee is a family man, respected and engaged in all communities. I have worked with him on community projects. Being an active community leader myself, I have personally met Bobby Singh as well. Then I see her post about Steve Lee giving her some grief back in 2012. I asked a few questions, including a request for more facts. Instead of a civil discussion about my question, Bobby's 5 women army decided to attack and then silence me on every possible platform, slandering me, including Bobby's Facebook page, Jack's Chronicles, and Elk Grove Tribune. I was shocked at their hypocrisy. I asked Bobby to not allow personal attacks on me for merely asking questions. She refused, stating that she did not want to disappoint her friends. Bobby's inability to make the right decision is deeply concerning in its pathological immaturity. I would like the City Council to address the following. Bobby attacked the Hmong community by claiming that the Hmong system silenced women. Somehow this erupted out of her hate for Steve Lee 3 to 4 months before elections and 8 years later. Please investigate. Bobby and her friends who have relentlessly silenced Elk Grove citizens with extreme form of bullying. If Bobby is confronted with a question she doesn't like, she will block, delete, silence, slander, punish whoever is doing the questioning, calling them attack dogs. She calls herself a lion and those who question her as sheep. This is the language of dangerous bullies. Please investigate. We have felt suffocated, abused, frustrated. Her language has harmed an entire community. She is not fit to hold public office. I respectfully ask that Nancy, Jacqueline, Linda be seriously investigated, as many members of the City Council have also exhibited this. We are requesting independent investigation of the council members as well. So I am significantly frustrated. Bobby states 2012 something happened. Jacqueline Marino says mayor did not stop some other person harassing her. Nancy Espinoza claims Steve brought somebody to run against her. Jack Chung has some other claims of harassment. My research shows many city council members have actually been found guilty of wrongdoing. None of them were censured. Why? None of them were sent for a grand jury investigation, or have they? And what was the outcome? People of Elk Grove have overwhelming proof of racism, intimidation, bullying, threatening, and silencing by these women. How is that not a crime, and why is there no investigation? Why is the city council pretending that to believe these women when there is absolutely no proof? This is rather alarming and concerning that an entire city council will actually stand there and watch women
Time is up, ma'am.
and join in the wolf scream.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
And with that, I'm just doing a quick review of my systems, but that is the last speaker that I had under Section 5, public comment. With that, that would take us on to Section 6, general administration information.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is Jason Behrman, City Manager. 2 teams of Elk Grove Police Department officers left yesterday for Lake County to provide support for the LNU Lightning Complex fire. 6 of our officers are stationed outside of the town of Middleton, assisting with evacuations and security of vacated areas. Our officers are scheduled to be released from their assignment on Friday, August 28th. Pleased to announce that the Sacramento chapter of the American Public Works Association, APWA, is recognizing 3 of the city's recently completed capital projects with Project of the Year awards. Construction of the Aquatic Center, Animal Shelter, and the Police Department's Real-Time Information Center has been recognized for excellent management, administration, design, sustainability, construction, and community relations. A virtual award ceremony is being coordinated for the fall. Please join me in congratulating the Public Works Department, their consultants and contractors, and many city departments involved in the successful completion of these projects. The Elk Grove Chamber of Commerce will host Mayor Steve Lee for a special online State of the City address tomorrow night at 6 p.m. This annual event is normally held in March. It was rescheduled and converted to an online event due to COVID-19. To attend, please register on the Chamber's website. The Diversity and Inclusion Commission has been working closely with staff to offer a number of online events, classes, and experiences throughout the month of August. Their festivities will conclude this Sunday with a live online painting performance from world-renowned Elk Grove artist David Garibaldi. Tune into the city's Facebook page at 7 p.m. for a 1-hour performance that will feature a combination of music, artistry, and crowd participation. As part of the city's response to the National Dialogue on Racism, the Staff Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team is presenting a 4-part webinar series starting next week for staff to learn more about systemic racism, addressing bias, and promoting equity. Staff will engage in active, reflective learning experiences during and between sessions to enhance their awareness and knowledge of self and others as it relates to race. All sessions will be facilitated by Dr. Christy Haggins, a founding member of Safe Black Space, who also teaches doctoral level courses in multicultural counseling and therapy skills. Elk Grove's newest open-air market will make its debut next Thursday, September 3rd at District 56. Neighbor Good Market, Elk Grove, will be a weekly certified farmers market offered each Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m. on the Avenue of District 56. Designed in compliance with CDC guidelines, the market will offer consumers a new place to shop while providing farmers and local small and micro businesses a new way to sell their goods. The market is produced in partnership with Unseen Heroes. Masks will be required in the market. For details, visit www.neighborgoodmarkets.com. Also, District 56, Food Truck Mania is occurring on Wednesday, September 2nd from 4 to 7 p.m. in the Aquatic Center parking lot off Bighorn and Denali. This popular food truck event will host a number of trucks offering grab-and-go service the first Wednesday of the month. The city's police department recently introduced CCTV, capturing crime through video. This program allows residents and business owners to voluntarily register the location of the video surveillance systems with the Elk Grove Police Department. Registered participants will receive a CCTV sticker to display at their home or workplace. The sticker will allow officers on scene to easily identify locations where video surveillance is available. Details about the program and online registration form is available on the police department website. In accordance with city holidays, City Hall will be closed on Monday, September 7th in observance of Labor Day. A few updates are related to COVID-19 and the city's response. The Elk Grove Elk Grove-based small businesses with 20 employees or less, an annual revenue of less than $3 million, who have been negatively impacted by COVID-19, may be eligible for grants from the city of up to $25,000. The city is now accepting online grant applications until Sunday, August 30th at 5 p.m. Details about the program can be found on the city's website at elkgrovecity.org/COVID-19biz. Additionally, Elk Grove nonprofit organizations have until this Friday, August 28th, to submit their funding requests for the CARES Nonprofit Grant Program. The program is open to any nonprofit organization that primarily serves Elk Grove residents or businesses that have experienced an increased demand for their services or canceled events due to the pandemic to qualify for grants from $3,000 to $25,000. Details on program guidelines, eligibility, and online applications are now available on the city's website at elkgrovecity.org/caresgrants. Finally, our Great Plates Delivered program, which you heard about tonight, which launched on May 13, is helping hundreds of seniors every day. Currently, there are over 433 seniors participating in the program and 14 restaurants. More than 86,000 meals have been delivered to seniors in need since the program's launch. As of August 21st, Great Plates has invested more than $1.5 million in local restaurants. An extension of the program has the program running through September 9th. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Are there any questions? I hear no questions. So let's move on to the next section.
Take us to section 7, council comments, reports, and future agenda items.
Okay, let's go ahead and start with Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, sir. I just have a few items. I have the Public Library Authority meeting tomorrow. And, I wanted to bring up Miss Lynn Wheat's comment about attending the Groundwater Authority meeting. And I'm wondering if it's not already advertised in our our monthly newsletter that we send out or any of the newsletters that we send out. I'm wondering if we can add that on there just so that the public is aware of this meeting. And I like her comment about putting the picture of the meter on there or whatnot. I'm wondering if that's something we can do just so our community is aware of the meeting and we have folks attending that meeting.
Absolutely.
And then Mr. Alejandro brought up a really good point about Latino Heritage Month. I'm hoping that's something that if we're not already celebrating in the month of September, that we can add that to our calendar as well too. And a couple of things based off of the speakers earlier. Quite a few people brought up Miss Bobby Singh Allen, and I want to let you know that you need to take this up at the school board meetings, and you need to voice your concerns with the school board members and the trustees there. The second one is that I heard a few people say that what is happening in the Hmong culture and the Hmong community, and it's dividing us, and I understand and I get that. And that's why I think Mayor Lee agreed to doing an educational session or a class for our community, because I believe in the clan system. I mean, every community has a community response accountability system. Everybody does. And I know the clan system has been around for centuries. And I think it's just more of an educational piece where we need to come together and educate our community about the Hmong culture and the Hmong clan system as well too. And I think people would benefit from it. Mayor Lee had mentioned not just the Hmong community, but all communities. And I agree with that. But I think right now, because the topic is around the Hmong culture, and we've had quite a few Hmong community members call in about it, I think that's one that I'd like to get started on. And I know, Mayor, you agreed to doing something like that with some of the women leaders in our community. And so I'd like to work with you on getting that up and going, because I think that's going to help with a lot of the hurt feelings that we've heard from many of the Hmong community that have called in. And then we had a caller that mentioned changing the time limit and the fact that I brought up because it was the first day of school the next day. And, Mr. Lindgren had said we had 100 people signed up to speak that night. And had we let all 100 people speak, I did say that we want to hear from every single person. And if we let everybody speak for 3 minutes and 100 people on there, we would be there for hours. And I wrote down every single name and took notes of all of the callers. We had about 75. People had to wait. And if we had given everybody 3 minutes, I don't think we would have been able to hear everybody. And so that was my reasoning why. It's not because we didn't want to hear from everybody. We wanted to hear from everybody, but we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to talk. Already just limiting it to a minute, we had 25 callers that we didn't get to out of that 100 because of that reason. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Hume.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report will be short. I had a meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority, but as Councilmember Suen is the chair of that body, I'll let him report on that meeting. Had an RT meeting. Most of the meeting was consumed by a closed session topic, and so I can't discuss what was going on there. Had a sanitation board district this morning with the mayor in attendance, and one of the primary items on the agenda was discussion of economic development efforts of the sanitation district. And so I just want to remind businesses that are looking to start up as we come out of this situation and get an economy up and going again, that there are sewer credits available for certain qualifying businesses that help offset a little bit of those startup costs. And also, if you are a ratepayer who is struggling right now, that there is relief options available to you. The sanitation district's done a really good job, staff and the board, of being good fiscal stewards. And so it's allowed for a little bit of money, non-rate, non-fee revenue to be used for some of these ancillary programs. And then Friday morning, have a connector, a Joint Powers Authority meeting, and that will be conducted remotely. And then like Councilmember Nguyen, I just want to address some of the callers who, again, seem to be dug in on making this about something that for me, it has never been about. And I have on every occasion that we've discussed it, tried to make that point, that this is not an indictment of a whole culture. It is a examination of the action and inaction of an individual. And so to continue to deflect and throw my name and Vice Mayor Detrick's name out there, I don't, as far as I'm concerned, you're not making your case. You're simply engaging in the very behavior for which the mayor has been criticized throughout this proceeding. So you're welcome to do it. That's your First Amendment right. But as Councilmember Nguyen said, we made a judgment call based off of the overwhelming volume and the fact that this is not a personality contest, and so, or was not a personality contest. So anyway, I think more air is being consumed on this matter than it deserves, frankly. But I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Suen.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to mention anything about that, but I think I'll just close out Councilmember Hume's comment with I think this council did the most objective thing it could do by referring the matter to a grand jury and out of this council and the city hall's hands. So for those that would would claim there was some bias, I would remind folks of that. I wanted to follow up with the cell tower applications. I do want to, I guess maybe I'd ask Mr. Hobbs if we could speak to what are we noticing folks and in the future, just to recognize when so they're able to understand that there's an application pending near them, near residents.
So let me give you a kind of a thank you, Councilmember Soon. This is John Hobbs, your city attorney. Let me just kind of give a quick background on where we came and where we are now. So as the council recalls and others listening may recall, we had a number of public meetings leading up to the master licensing agreements. MLAs is what we call them. We have one with Verizon, one with AT&T. Those agreements identified certain sites. The Verizon one identified, I think, a couple of dozen. The AT&T one identified about a dozen or so sites. Those were identified by maps. They were also identified by what we call pole numbers. Someone can go out and physically look at the poles to identify where those facilities are going to be. And those specific sites, some in residential, some in industrial, some in other areas of the city, were approved by the city council through that process, through that public hearing process. So those sites have been completed, those are approved. There's not a requirement to give further additional public notice for those particular sites. And we haven't given specific public notice for those particular sites. If, however, somebody comes in for a residential site, they would be required to go through a planning process, a minor use permit, a minor conditional use permit, which would require a public hearing and a public notice. That was, as the council may recall, one of the requirements of the MLA going forward, that there would be a further vetting of sites that had not already been looked at by the city council. So those would get further public hearings and notice. For the ones that were pre-approved, however, those are ministerial approvals. They do not require additional specific notices since they've already been approved.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And appreciate Public Works staff to continue to work with the residents. I know it may not satisfy them, but at least having an avenue for them to communicate and air any grievances is appreciated. I also want to take a moment to just recognize all the calamity around us. We know about the pandemic, but the fires and what Jason mentioned, we've got some of our own Elk Grove PD being deployed. We've got about, I believe, approximately 15 of our CSD firefighters that have also been deployed, and so I just want to remind folks to keep them in our hearts and minds and send well wishes their way. The fires, I received a briefing from CAL FIRE earlier before this meeting, and the Hennessy and Hennessy fire continues to expand, and the LNU complex they're still fighting those. So for STA, the meeting that we had last, we put an advertisement out to recruit a new executive director, as Mr. Kempton will be stepping down / retiring at the end of this year. And there was also an item there that kind of speaks to a larger issue about transportation funding. There's I believe, if I recall correctly, a couple $100 million left in capacity for the existing Measure A sales tax. So again, remember that's split amongst the county and all the cities within the county. So there's a trusted supply of transportation funding coming down the road. And what I want to tie that to is recently at a SACOG meeting, we probably had the most contentious meeting that we've ever had in the 5+ years that I've witnessed that board, and that is how to divide funding up, which has normally been done at a competitive process at the SACOG board level, but there's been some recognition about how funds are distributed and whether a partial, at least formulaic model where you get money, depending on certain things, whether it's population or lane miles, that's meant to be more equitable versus all straight competition. And this is between the 4 different counties. So Yola, Yuba, Sutter, and Sacramento, and all the cities within those counties. And so I just want to make, our residents aware there's a conversation ensuing about that, which, could affect how we receive some money for transportation. So a lot of talk about transportation funding going on around the region and the shortfall of that funding. Then library authorities tomorrow, as Councilmember Nguyen mentioned, and then we have a mega region meeting on Friday, which is made up of committee members, of which I'm a part of, from SACOG and other councils of governments in the Bay Area and San Joaquin County Council of Governments to talk about how to balance the jobs and housing within the quote mega region. And so anyway, we have a meeting coming up on that this Friday. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Detrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilman Soon must have had read my notes. I wanted to, thank all our first responders, across the city, the state, the nation. With the COVID-19, with all the medical professionals, obviously put themselves in harm's way, and now with the fires, floods, and hurricanes across the nation. I want to, it's definitely a special thanks to our EGPD. So Chief Albright, make sure you could pass that on to our team and then to our CSD firefighters as well. I know typically General Manager Josh Green listens into our council meetings. So General Manager Green, if you're on the line, make sure you pass that on to our fire team. These have all been pretty trying times in many professions, and many of you know that I've been with PG&E for 47 years, and I've seen my share of tragedies with our PG&E employees. In this CAL FIRE situation down in Vacaville is no different, where we lost one of our PG&E troublemen. So anybody who's out there serving the public, please keep them in your thoughts and prayers, because the goal is for every one of them to go home at night. And not all of them make it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, members. I certainly wanted to echo what the Vice Mayor and also Councilmember Sun had said. Look, we know the hard work that these men and women that put their lives on the line every day, and certainly during these troubling times, we are very grateful. So thank you to our first responders and your excellent work. Councilmember Hume had already reported on the sanitation meeting this morning, and then I have air quality tomorrow. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. Thank you, and let's move to the next item.
That'll take us to section 8, the consent calendar items. And Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, we do have a member of the public who signed up to speak on a few items in regards to the consent calendar items.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open for public comment.
And staff will be bringing over our caller.
Caller, you can go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This is Lynn Wheat, and under consent, I'm going to speak to 2 items tonight, 8.11 and 8.18. On 8.11, I want to thank the staff for the update and report on the City Council priorities. As I've mentioned before, I believe accomplishments and progress should not be hidden under consent items, but should be open for discussion and reflection. So again, I want to thank staff for a very well-written report. 8.18. As always, I appreciate our Public Works Department. As a City Council candidate for District 3, I appreciate that the majority of the 2021 crack seal budget will be used for the crack streets in District 3. While I agree that crack sealing is an effective way to prolong the life of an asphalt street, A published study by Stantec Consulting in 2013 for a group called Communities of Tomorrow found that the life expectancy of crack sealing is between 2 and 7 years. The staff report notes that the city is in its third year of a 7-year crack seal program. I hope that at some point the City Council addresses the actual budget needs to adequately fund proper street maintenance as a part of the CIP, instead of relying on stopgap measures like crack sealing. Much like painting of the Golden Gate Bridge, where as soon as they complete painting the bridge, it's time to start painting at the other end again, I would hope we don't become a perpetual crack sealed city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other speakers?
And we have no other speakers under the consent calendar items.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Council deliberation and direction. Is there a motion?
I'll move the consent calendar. I just want to call attention to the grant for the Laguna Creek Trail. Look forward to hopefully you're successful in receiving that. Thank you.
Okay, got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Roll call, please.
For the roll call vote, Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes.
Councilmember Hume?
Aye.
Councilmember Suen?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Detrick?
Yes.
And Mayor Lee?
Yes.
With a 5-0 vote, the consent calendar items will pass. That will take us on to section 9, our public hearings. And that one public hearing is item 9.1 to consider the 60th annexation to Community Facilities District number 2006-1 for maintenance services.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm Renee Attar, a finance analyst for the city. I'm here this evening with a presentation for a proposed annexation into one of the city's special tax districts. Just a little bit of background on the special tax districts. This slide may look familiar. The city maintains 8 special tax districts. The requirements are specific for each project and vary according to the geographic location and building use. Annexations into appropriate districts are typically part of a project's approval process, and the special taxes are subject to annual rate adjustments. Tonight, there's only one project that is being proposed for annexation into CFD 2006-1 maintenance services. The CFD provides funding for maintenance services throughout the city of Elk Grove, such as for public parkways, parks, open space, pathways, medians, community center, and so forth. Because this is a a services tax district, this assessment will be levied in perpetuity. And just a little bit more specifics about the project. Heartstone Homes is a 21 single-family residential unit project located southeast of Calvine Road and Elk Grove Flooring Road. The project was annexed into CFD 2003 to Police Services, Street Maintenance District 1, Zone 3, and Stormwater Drainage Fee Zone 2 at the last council meeting on August 12th. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Hearing that there are no questions.
Nope.
Going to go ahead and declare the public hearing open for CFD 2006-1 and open for public comment. Mr. Clerk, is there anyone signed up to speak?
For item 9.1, I do not have any members of the public signed up to speak or provide public comments on this item.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and declare the public hearing for CFD 2006-1 closed. Motion 1, please.
Motion 1.
Second.
Got a motion second. Roll call, please.
For the roll call vote, Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes.
Councilmember Hume?
Aye.
Councilmember Suen?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Detrick?
Yes.
And Mayor Lee?
Yes, and ballot tabulation, please.
Of 21 possible votes, 21 affirmative votes were cast authorizing the city of Elk Grove to levy a special tax, the rate apportioned and described. The measure passes with more than 2/3 of all votes cast in the election in favor of the measure. A resolution declaring the results of the election is available for council consideration.
Okay, motion 2.
Motion 2.
So motions, there's a second. All right, roll call, please.
Roll call vote on motion 2. Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilmember Hume.
Aye.
Councilmember Suen.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Detrick.
Yes.
And Mayor Lee.
Yes.
Pass 5-0.
All right, motion 3.
Motion 3, introduce and waive the full reading by substitution of title only, an ordinance levying and apportioning the special tax and territory annexed to Community Facilities District number 2006-1, maintenance services, annexation number 60, and amending Elk Grove Municipal Code section 3.19.010.
Second.
Hey, there's a motion, there's a second. Roll call, please.
For the roll call vote on the third motion in the ordinance, Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilmember Hume.
Aye.
Councilmember Suen.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Detrick.
Yes.
And Mayor Lee.
Yes.
That item will pass 5-0, and that'll conclude the actions under the public hearing.
All right.
That'll take us. Sorry, Mayor, I didn't mean to jump in on you.
Sorry about that, Jason. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to carry us on in the agenda. So that'd be taking us to section 10, the regular agenda action items and recommendations, starting with item 10.1, which is to receive an update on the 2021 housing element update, including introduction of the draft sites list.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Christopher Jordan presenting this update for you on the housing elements and the process to completing the update. Tonight, we're going to go over just recapping some backgrounds since we last talked about this last fall, 2019. May have fallen off the radar, so we'll get you back up to speed on the element itself and the process of updating it. Then we'll talk about the housing element sites, which will be used to implement the regional housing needs allocation as adopted for the region for the city, and talk about some other methods of achieving RHNA, and then we'll go over some next steps. Tonight's meant to be a check-in opportunity. We're not asking for formal direction this evening, but it's an opportunity for the public to provide comment and for the council to weigh in on the process. So just recapping on the background briefly. What is the housing element? It is a component of the general plan, which is the city's overall strategic vision for development and other matters. It's a required component of the general plan as provided for in state law. And it's the only element that requires an 8-year update cycle, with our next one being due in 2021. For housing elements, the state has some overall goals of adequately planning for the housing needs of everyone in the community, designating policies that encourage housing production, and, important for tonight's discussion, zoning land at a variety of densities to support different housing types. So as I mentioned, this next update is due in 2021. The council is required to take action to adopt it by, I believe it's May 15th of 2021. And this next element will cover the planning period through 2029. We'll talk tonight about the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. This is a state process which looks at the distribution of housing needs around the state. The way it occurs is the State Housing and Community Development Department establishes a regional determination on what they forecast as the needed housing in a variety of income categories for a region. So for the Sacramento region, we've received that allocation that occurred in August of last year. Then the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG, takes that determination and prepares a methodology that meets certain state requirements for dividing it up amongst all of the jurisdictions in the region, both cities and the unincorporated counties. And then the jurisdictions prepare their housing element updates that show how they will meet those allocations. Those allocations that I mentioned occur over income categories, and you can see those listed here in the table from very low income through above moderate income. And those are based on set percentages of the area median income. So very low income are households that are less than 50% of the area median income, low income 51 to 80%, and so on across the table. I want to talk briefly about how housing development occurs. There's essentially, in an oversimplified discussion, 4 key steps that occur. First is the regional housing needs allocation itself, which we just talked about. And then we come to what the city process is, in this case, identifying sites that meet the allocation the city's been given through the housing elements, and then zoning those sites for the housing development called for in the element. And that's based upon density levels that the income levels get translated into. Ultimately, though, those sites would get built. That's the ideal circumstance, and wanting those to happen. Does the city have a requirement that that housing get built? Does it have to build the housing? The short answer is no. The city is not obligated to have that directly constructed. It's up to private development for that to occur. But the focus is on encouraging housing production through zoning. So essentially, we identify where properties for housing would occur. We zone those sites for that development, and then essentially clears the pathway for development to occur, housing production to occur on those sites. So that's where the city's responsibility ends. But there are penalties that do exist in state law, particularly over the last couple of legislative cycles, where if the city doesn't meet the housing targets that are called for in the RHNA, there can be automatic density increases and loss of project review authority for certain types of projects, among other things. So while we don't necessarily have a role in the production of housing, we do get penalized when when our policies and actions don't necessarily provide for its steady development. So the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation that is been applied to Elk Grove for this coming cycle is outlined here. So in the very low and low income categories, there's a combination of about 4,265 units. These are typically met through higher density residential developments. So units or zoning that has a minimum density of between 20 and 30 units an acre. And then the moderate income and above moderate income make up about another 4,000 units. Those two are traditionally made up with any residential density, although we typically use more of a medium density like an RD7, RD10, RD12 zone to count towards moderate income. Above moderate can be with any density calculation or density applicability. And this really comes down to the basic assumption that density equals affordability. So the lower dense a project is or a development housing type is, it would be more geared towards or more soon to be geared towards higher income households. Whereas lower density products at the other end of the scale would typically be found or applied to lower income categories. And then more middle income would fall in the middle of the road, middle of this chart. So again, the city must zone sufficient vacant land at appropriate densities to accommodate each of these income categories. And like I've been saying, this occurs through the zoning of specific sites, and it goes to this idea that there's affordability by virtue of the design or the density of a project. There's a default density for lower income that we have to consider. We have to allow up to 30 units per acre on these sites, although we can go higher if we desire to. There are some options we'll talk about later this evening for non-site specific implementation of RHNA, including inclusionary zoning and accessory dwelling unit programs. So we'll talk about that at the end of the item. But now I want to move into the sites themselves. And there's a term we use in housing element called adequate sites. Essentially, these are sites that have the minimum acreage, produce the minimum acreage needed to meet the unit allocation under our RHNA allocation. There are standards under housing element law the city must consider. These sites have to be zoned for residential developments. They can accommodate a variety of housing types. So it needn't be a traditional garden style walk-up apartment. It can be other types of housing. We have to account for the entire range, and we have to accommodate for the minimum in each of the RHNA categories. Our existing housing element has this map included in it, which identifies sites for both lower income and moderate and above moderate portions of our previous allocation. So what this shows in the canary yellow color are the lower income sites, and then in the more orange color are the moderate and above moderate sites. This map is straight out of the element, so it doesn't differentiate between sites that have some level of project approval or construction that's occurred on them. It's also based upon project approvals and status of master planning efforts that existed in 2013 when the map was prepared. So for example, site 11, which has an allocation of lower income units to it, is the Southeast Policy Area. We've since adopted the Southeast Policy Area Strategic Plan, which divides up the requirement that this map and the table that accompanies it illustrate into specific sites that are spread around the plan area. Similarly, with Site 21, it's not the entirety of that site, but it's actually 2 locations that have been zoned by the council at this point, one on the north side of Laguna Creek and one on the south side. So doing a little bit of math here, our prior RHNA allocation for 2013 to 2021 was 3,462 units in the low income area. The current elements accounted for 3,764, so there was a small buffer there of units. And then then once you discount for sites that have been approved and built on, there's 3,259 units capacity in the current exhibit. Our new allocation for 2021 is 4,265. The way housing element law works is we have to, again, identify enough land for that 4,265. But if a project gets approved on a site identified in the housing element for moderate income or above moderate income development, we're not allowed to preclude that on a affordability basis. As long as it meets our development standards, we're obligated to approve it. But we have to make up for that loss of unit potential somewhere else in the city. And we're given about 120 days or so to find that alternative site. So with that in mind, staff is recommending that a buffer be included in the current and the forthcoming allocation. This table identifies a buffer of 25%. That buffer amount can be whatever the council ultimately decides it to be. But for calculating purposes this evening, we're holding 25% in here. So that would bring the total unit yield needed to 5,331. And when you subtract out the 3,259 that could roll forward from the existing plan, there's a need for approximately 2,000 units to be identified. So where would we possibly assign these units? Your staff report goes into a little bit of detail on this, but we're going to go deeper this evening with more exhibits illustrating housing site location around the city. This first one looks at existing built multifamily development within the city and divides it between generally multifamily units, which in the bar chart are on the left-hand side, and then exclusively income restricted units. So it's a subset of the all multifamily units. And this map does it, and the chart do it by council district. This is but one way to look at the distribution of units. We'll show another example in a moment. But what you can see from here is that the majority of units that are multifamily developments within the city actually occur in District 1 at 36%, with the next highest being in District 4 at 31%. But of the income restricted units that exist in the city today, 45% of the total units are in District 4, with then District 3 followed at 25%. This data is by unit, not by project count. So what you'll easily notice is, say in District 2 as an example, there appear to be more of these orange dots indicating project location than there are in, say, District 1. But District 1 tends to have larger project sizes, larger unit counts within those projects in comparison to District 2. So that's where the difference happens in these numbers. So as I mentioned, there's other ways to look at the data. This one breaks it up into 6 geographies or neighborhoods or plan areas, however you'd like to consider it. So we have Laguna West and the older Laguna area, what we call West Sheldon, basically Sheldon Road from 99 past Elk Grove Florin before you get to the Sheldon rural area. Old Elk Grove, which is the balance of the east side of 99. What we call the new growth area, which is essentially Laguna Ridge, Southeast Policy area, Sterling Meadows and Lent Ranch, and then East Franklin plan area. And you can see by the charts here that the majority of units occur within the Laguna area. The majority of affordable units are in the Laguna area. And then you can see the other areas that these fall into. So again, these are just different ways of looking at the distribution of these units around the city and a consideration as we plan potential future sites. So the existing RHNA sites that can move forward are shown on this exhibit in the blue color. And you can see very simply that the majority of these units are in District 4. These are in the new growth area, predominantly Laguna Ridge and Southeast Policy area, and one site within the Lent Ranch area along Promenade. This has historically been done because this is where the majority of development has been occurring historically. So these are opportunity sites that have been identified as these areas have been master planned. We could look at upzoning some of the existing sites as a way to meet the allocation. So this would essentially allow us to take additional credit from the existing sites. We wouldn't have to identify more sites in doing so. So we could increase the minimum density on these sites from 20.1 units an acre, or what we calculate as 21 units an acre, to say 25 units an acre. And this could actually, across 10 sites we flagged for this potential upzoning, add almost another 340 units. So that's 340 units we wouldn't have to find acreage for elsewhere in the city by upzoning these sites. So we will still need new sites. To do that, again, we look at distribution around the city as one factor to consider in identifying available sites. We look at vacancy of sites, sites that are undeveloped, or sites that maybe are larger in acreage, but maybe only have one house on them, or maybe an older barn structure, particularly those that haven't had any building permit activity in the last 10 years or so. And then we look through a number of different criteria in selecting these sites. We look at proximity to services, including grocery stores, schools and parks, proximity to jobs, access to transit. We look at ideal property sizes. Generally, you're going to want something between 3 and 10 acres. We've historically used sites up to 15 or even 18 acres in size. Those become harder to finance, whereas sites that are under 3 acres are equally hard to finance. You're not getting enough unit yield out of them to make the projects pencil. But that 3 to 10 acres is sort of the sweet spot that generally housing developers look for. And then we also want to look at sites that are generally free of critical habitat or special status species, wetlands, or other barriers to affordable housing production. We want to be able to clear those governmental barriers in order to get the housing produced. And that's something that HCD looks for as they review the sites and ultimately approve the element. So these are the candidate sites that staff has flagged and is putting forward for discussion and possible consideration next year. From a distribution perspective, the majority of these site potentials, and these are based on units, would be in District 3, a little over half of them, with the balances being in Districts 1, 2, and then 4. In total, this represents almost 3,000 units across the city that could potentially be included. So we thought it was important to sort of look at a composite then of what the city could potentially look like. So this chart and the exhibit show what that distribution of multifamily units could end up being. These are total multifamily units. This data doesn't differentiate between affordable units versus the overall total. It's just the total units. So the first piece is the built multifamily and that data, and then the existing sites, and then the candidate sites that we showed a moment ago, and then we total it all together. So if every site was selected and every site had the minimum density that we're identifying in the calculations at this point included, then the distribution of multifamily around the city would look like the bar chart on the far right side, with 30% of the total units being in District 4, and then 28% in District 3, 24% in District 1, and 11% in District 2.
Christopher, if I can interrupt for just a second, it's Councilmember
Yes, sir.
Hume. Do you have a similar bar chart that shows multifamily units as a percentage of total DUEs?
I do have the data. I did not include it this evening, but we can certainly follow up with that.
Well, I think that tells a different story as far as the percentage of multifamily units with respect to single-family dwellings and other DUEs.
Okay.
Would that be a reasonable assumption that might paint a different picture?
It certainly informs the discussion, yes. And I think if there's other discussions tonight, I can try and pull some of the data, but we can certainly follow up with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In terms of outreach, we're conducting outreach as best we can during this COVID period. From a community and resident outreach perspective, we have started a series of webinars. The first 2 were at the end of July, and we have others that are planned in October and November to get folks engaged in the process, learn about what's going on, and begin providing feedback. And then we also have, from a sites perspective, what we call the scenario builder, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. For property owner outreach on these sites, we have sent letters to all property owners on the candidate sites list. We've started hearing back from some of them. That is a slow process, and we'll send out reminder letters to those we haven't heard from later this fall. And this outreach effort will continue throughout the process into the first half of 2021, so that ultimately you get a recommendation on all the correspondence that we've collected through the process. So the scenario builder, I'm showing a screenshot here of it, but the concept is, and having been through a couple of housing cycles here at the city, we know that folks have oftentimes concerns about the site that's most closest to them. And that's good feedback to get, and we certainly want to collect that. But that's not necessarily the analysis and decision-making process that the Planning Commission or City Council will ultimately go through on these sites. There's trade-offs that occur, there's decisions that have to be made on each site, considerations, and ultimately a balanced plan has to be produced. So to help articulate the interconnectedness of these sites and the considerations that need to be made, the trade-offs that occur, we worked with a vendor to prepare this tool, which treats it essentially like a pro forma. So participants are asked to go through and select for each site that is a candidate site, would you include the site or not? And then for an existing site that may be proposed for potential upzoning, should it be upzoned or not? And then in real time, you can see the math occurring as you click these different boxes on and off. We've organized it by council district just as a way to break up the sites because there are 25 candidates and I believe 16 or 18 existing sites. So it's a lot of sites to go through. We also have folks look a little bit at the buffer component. If you go over to the needs allocation side, it's cut off here on the slide, but it has the base allocation that we received for the lower income category. And then you can actually toggle the buffer and 5% increments up or down. So it's a very interactive way for folks to go through. They can leave comments on individual sites. To date, we've had over 64 submissions on this and over 900 page views. We can track clicks, generally speaking, for folks that just want to look at the site but don't necessarily submit a plan. We do require that a plan submitted be balanced, meaning you have at least the minimum RHNA allocation inclusive of whatever buffer you select, because that is the exact same process that the Commission and Council will be asked to go through next year. So we encourage folks, if you haven't gone to the website, to please do so. The link is up on the screen, and I can come back to the slide later if anybody would like, but it's a great way to provide feedback on the sites. In terms of property owner outreach, this slide is just a snapshot. We're continuing to talk with folks and expect more correspondence in the coming weeks and months. Sites C5, just to sort of summarize what we've heard, is a site on the south side of Sheldon Road, just east of East Stockton. It's a collection of about 6 or 7 parcels totaling about 12 acres. They've got a commercial zoning right now. We've heard from 2 owners there about opposition to being included. Site C6 is just cat-a-corner from that at the northeast corner of Power Inn and Sheldon. It's also commercially zoned site. That property owner has, in sort of similar timing, has actually filed an application to do a general plan amendment and rezone the site to single-family residential. So it'll just be a matter of how those 2 requests get processed, but they're recommending or asking for single-family on that site instead through the separate application. Site C10 and C12 are in Laguna West. They're in the town center. They have butt onto Laguna Boulevard. They're on either side of the commercial developments, and that owner has voiced support for being included, as has the owner of Site C9, which is on Calvine, just east of the railroad tracks. So as I mentioned, going over the agenda, there are other methodologies to potentially look at for achieving RHNA. 2 specifically that we'll look at this evening are inclusionary housing and the second dwelling unit program. Inclusionary housing is the idea that residential development projects, as they occur, would be obligated to include within their project a minimum percentage of units as affordable to lower income households. So, for instance, you could have a 100-unit subdivision of single-family homes and a 10% inclusionary requirement. So at least 10% of those units would be affordable to certain income segments of the population. The benefit of this is that it allows for distribution of these units through new subdivisions and avoids potential overconcentration, particularly as can occur in exclusive development, apartment complex development. So an example regionally of a community that's done this is Roseville. They have a 10% inclusionary requirement, and it applies to both rental and ownership units. And they actually divide that up between not just lower income, so very low and low income, but also middle income categories or middle income household income categories. So you can see that split here, 40, 40, 20. Elk Grove is not historically used inclusionary. Instead, we have opted for a affordable housing fee. This is a fee we charge on all new developments. Currently, the rate, though, for office development is at 0. That was a council decision to do that. But other land use categories, particularly office and retail, residential and retail pay a fee. And that fee is then used to assist with financing of affordable housing projects. Traditionally, we provided that funding on a competitive basis. There's usually some sort of RFP or call for projects that goes out. And then developers can use that money to match against tax credit financing. We've also provided a streamlined process for development to occur. Recently, the city has started using these funds for acquisition of sites. What's historically happened is developers, once an RFP goes out, they get into a competitive stance to acquire sites, which can lead to a number of issues. So the city has looked at opportunities to acquire sites up at the front end, and then we could issue RFPs for those sites specifically. And then they could benefit from additional financing as we provide it through the course of that project. The second option to look at are second dwelling units or accessory dwelling units. More jurisdictions are turning to this as an option to meet their RHNA allocation. These are like I mentioned, second units. Typically, they're developed in the backyard, or maybe they're attached to the units. There are size components to these. You can have programs that promote their construction, including reducing fees, streamlining approvals, providing template plans, or other mechanisms. And the intent would be these units are created for and rented to lower income households. And the benefit being they distribute units around the community. So again, you don't have a concentration concern. Don't necessarily think this is the best fit for Elk Grove. There could be, and we believe there would be, neighborhood compatibility concerns. There may be overall feasibility issues and acceptance. Historically, we've seen very limited second unit development. And we don't track data on what amount of those that have been built are rental units, as opposed to just, say, a family member living in them, maybe more as an in-laws quarters, or you have an older child that moves out there or what have you. So we're concerned about the feasibility of that program and being successful. So next steps. We have started the environmental review process. There was a notice of prep issued back in June that closed in July. And we're beginning work on the EIR that will accompany the housing elements. We continue to do public outreach, and again, we'll do more outreach to property owners and continue to ask folks to provide input on the sites. The council may want to receive public feedback this evening and provide any of that to staff for consideration. We're not recommending removing any sites at this time. We'd rather actually recommend that we continue with the process and continue to receive the feedback and ultimately make decisions, and staff can make a formal recommendation next year. And that if there's any other feedback you'd like to provide on the other methods, we could certainly receive that this evening. That concludes staff's presentation, available to answer questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, council member.
Mr. Jordan, you had mentioned inclusionary housing, and I have not been on the council long enough to know, has this ever been brought up to the council? Is there a reason why we haven't looked into this or entertained this or discussed this? And is that something that we can possibly look into?
We certainly could look into it and bring you back more information at a future agenda item. Historically, the council has chosen not to do it, than choosing that the fee program is a better avenue, an avenue that can provide for more housing production. I don't have specific stats looking at what the differences are between the two. That's information Sarah tracks a little bit more, and she's not here this evening. So again, we could bring more discussion back at a future agenda item if you'd like.
Yeah, or you could just, if you don't mind, Mr. Jordan, if you could just send it to me directly so I can look through it. I don't know if council even wants to bring it back for discussion, but I'd like to kind of look into it a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mayor, this is Councilmember Student. I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Christopher, thank you for this information. I received a comment from a member of the Stone Lake HOA regarding C4. I recognize you guys had already done outreach, but apparently they may not have received it. So if you could make it a point to outreach to the property owners of C4 and the Stone Lake HOA, perhaps might also be of interest to about this process. And then I just happy to have the conversation about inclusionary. From my experience, it hasn't been as effective in producing affordable housing without creating greater impact on the remainder of the housing community. Having worked in the industry, the deep discounts that are often used to produce that inclusionary zoning is then added back on to the remaining units, increasing the overall costs of the individual units in that development. So, but if there's been advances to that program, I'm happy to hear more and seeing how the outcomes have worked elsewhere. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Councilmember
Christopher, at one point you mentioned the last little bit there, you kind of touched on the fact that our fee program has been fairly effective. I believe there was a time where we led the region in the actual delivery of units vis-a-vis our fee program, respective to other neighboring jurisdictions. Do we have any numbers or data that kind of gives us a snapshot of where we're ranking or how we stack up as to some of these other jurisdictions and what they're doing?
Yes, my recollection is that is the case as well, that there was more production at one point of affordable housing in Elk Grove than other areas, especially in those that were having an inclusionary provision. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me this evening, but we could pull those up and bring them back to you.
Okay, and then so kind of touching back on the question that I asked in the middle of your presentation, and again, I apologize for interrupting, but I would be curious to know a little deeper dive into the diversity of units with respect to built multifamily relative to the number of single family units, either historically and also, say new permits issued and that sort of a thing. I mean, obviously to look at the distribution heavily weighted in one part of the city or another without looking at where the new growth area is occurring, I think it doesn't paint a full picture as far as where the problem is being compounded versus where it's trying to be solved. So I think that's important. And the other thing is that, in the next item on the middle income housing report, we're going to see a chart that shows that housing production, new home starts, has not caught up with its historical levels since the 2008 recession. Monthly housing starts is well below historical levels going all the way back to the 60s. And so, one of the problems of this whole nut as you try to crack it is that a big portion of affordability of homes comes in the supply, which is compounded by demand. And so when you're cutting off the supply side, you're increasing the demand side. And so I know even here in Elk Grove, neighborhoods that have traditionally been more affordable, which are primarily in the old parts of District 2, there's single-family houses which barely crest 1,000 square feet are going for north of $300,000, and that's the exact opposite of the definition of affordable in my estimation. And so I would like to, as we have this discussion, look at how we touch that third rail where we're making housing across the spectrum more affordable, which runs afoul, unfortunately, of constituent desire to keep higher home values. And so I think that that's sort of a dog chasing its tail, and we're going to have to figure out how we address that as well as we look at this. The only level of inclusionary housing that I would be willing to look at, and I do so with an obvious and historical bias because it's worked well for our company in the past, and that is including duplex or attached units within within a single-family residential neighborhood. I think that is a good way of integrating a variety of housing stock that helps meet that need. Those are all my comments for now. But I'd look forward to, between now and when this comes back, you and I getting together, Christopher, and sitting down and really hashing out some more thoughts on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
As Vice Mayor Detrick, I just got a comment to kind of piggyback on what Councilman Hume said on the inclusionary housing. You know, it's one thing I had mentioned in the past that some of the developments on every corner is put a duplex. And then that duplex, because of its size and magnitude, looks pretty much the same as all the rest of the single family homes there. And you're kind of killing two birds with one stone without really affecting the overall appeal of the neighborhood. So I think that's something that is important that we work with the developers on, because that'll help pick up some of our units as well. You know, I know some people want to try to balance the housing by district, and I've been pretty vocal that I think it's absolutely wrong to go back into a district that's fully developed, that has a couple infill pieces, that people did their due diligence to go out and research what type of housing their neighbors were going to be. And then for the city to come back and, in essence, kind of do a bait and switch on them and put a high density housing on something that somebody had all the intentions of having either like neighbors or something that they were fully aware of. So I think we need to be really careful when we're looking at that. I mean, I know we're stuck with having to raise our number of units, but when you go into an area that has no development yet, there's no housing. The people, when they buy in, they're going to know what they're buying into. But to negatively affect the existing homeowners is absolutely wrong. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing that there's nobody else, let's go ahead and open for public comment. Mr. Clerk, is there anyone signed up for public comment?
For item 10.1, there were no items received prior to the meeting, but what we do have are 4 callers who have signed up to speak under item 10.1.
Okay.
I have the first caller on the line. You may go ahead.
Hi, the city is at least consistent in keeping low-income sites clustered and isolated. Such placement of low-income housing violates the tenets of the city's intention of preserving diversity and encouraging integration of economic households. So-called affordable housing policy without living wages and job protections with full benefits creates ghettos. We must question public policies that keep sectors poor while enriching others. The state of California requires an affordable housing plan from its various regions, but it is mere cynicism to create plans the city never intends to implement. The city, along with the whole world, faces massive foreclosures and evictions. What are we going to do about catastrophic homelessness? During the Great Depression, 25% of the workers were unemployed, but that did not mean that 75% of the workers were fully employed. Women and children moved in with their extended families. Men were forced to homelessness and becoming vagabonds seeking work. And the minority communities, as usual, suffered manifold adverse effects of the collapse of the economy. This city, the whole world, needs a big dose of small d democracy. We need to hold community planning councils that take the pulse of the neighborhoods we live in. It might even pay to divide the city into workable parts so that the people who live here can meet their needs. Even the state workers are being furloughed 10%. We are headed for, if not already in, a massive economic depression that hurts people on Main Street while sparing the grifters on Wall Street. What happens to our U.S. Postal Service, how we allay hunger, and families no longer receiving school meals, where we put our neighbors when they lose a place to lay their heads. All this depends on how we trade in our old system of perpetual growth of capital profits for a sharing economy that sustains us. Wake up, City Council, wake up, it's over.
And I believe the speaker has concluded his comments for the item. We still have other speakers signed up under item 10.1, and we'll patch in our next speaker.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Hello, this is Sharon Anderson. I had an opportunity to participate in the planning process, and I really appreciate the city for offering that up. I've also participated in the early workshops. I think they were earlier this year, and I appreciate being involved with that. The one thing I would request going forward is that those of us who have been in the participation process to be receiving direct notices that the City Council will be considering these elements, and the Planning Commission as well. I think I got a notice about the Planning Commission, but I did not know that it was on the City Council agenda for tonight, so at last minute I was able to take a look. I appreciate Christopher Jordan's presentation. There is a lot for all of us to learn about that. I have a question. Do we receive federal funding for complying with these requirements? That was somebody during our neighborhood association meeting, we were asked that question, and I did not know the answer to that. And then the other part is the spatial arrangement along District 3. Are we considering the proximity to the city and county housing plans so that we do not saturate areas? I think the other council members have spoken about that we're not saturating areas that are already saturated by another jurisdiction to the north. That's a very important thing to think about. And that are we also allowed to consider the housing voucher and the spatial distribution of where those housing vouchers are being used? And then the other part is, are we also considering the overall rental home stock distribution? Because that's a wide-ranging cost and an attribute in communities. And then in moving forward, I don't know how you do this. Well, there was the one site on Power Inn and Sheldon Road. That 1 minute remains. Thank you. That's supposed to be a location that was supposed to provide jobs, and to rezone it to more housing is kind of doesn't agree with jobs housing balance that the city wants to try to do more of. And then considering when we go to design, co-location of housing and retail with the bottom floors is creative retail. You can still have affordable housing above that. Let's not just look like cookie cutter apartments all over the place. Let's look at making it inviting for everybody. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
And for item 10.1, we still have 2 speakers that had signed up prior, and staff are making the patch to them and getting them pulled into the meeting here.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Lee, members of the City Council. My name is John Gilday with the North State Building Industry Association. We appreciate the work that staff has done preparing this presentation, and we can sympathize with the increased RHNA allocation that Elk Grove is receiving as the whole region has been impacted. Staff report indicates a secondary dwelling unit program as a potential method of helping to achieve RHNA goals, and we encourage you to adopt this in your housing element update. Recent legislation, such as AB 881 and AB 671, has streamlined the approval and development of secondary dwelling units, and it shows that legislature is encouraging this behavior. We also understand that because of these new regulations, HCD is prepared to accept an increased amount of ADUs in your housing element than you've historically built. The report states that Elk Grove currently sees little development of these units, but an established secondary dwelling unit program may incentivize further production, as well as address some unit numbers. I'd also like to thank council members that spoke about their experiences on inclusionary housing. We've found that historically inclusionary housing policies can sometimes make it more difficult for projects to pencil out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. And I believe we have one more caller who has asked to be pulled into the meeting here, and staff are making that dial up. And it sounds like we just have to make the connection here.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Good evening. I want to thank staff. Oh, by the way, my name's Lynn Week. I want to thank staff for their dedication and work on our housing element. During this pandemic, I believe they have done their best to reach out and alert residents of this project. I commend staff for taking the risk in identifying within the report a very unpopular concept with developers, inclusionary housing. I have often heard our city compared to that of Roseville, and yet I believe Roseville is ahead of us in developing a sustainable city for current and future residents by including inclusionary housing. Roseville's policy has not slowed down the progress of development nor weakened the quality of standards in their city. Inclusionary housing can be done. It takes strong leadership and policy. I've brought this forth to you several times, and even with the general plan update mentioned this. I would like to see some strong leadership in our community that will provide an opportunity for our young working people to own a home. We can solve our affordable housing needs beyond apartments and cramming them together. Thank you.
And that concludes our speakers signed up under item 10.1. I'm just checking over on my systems, but nothing showing up. That would conclude our public comment on item 10.1.
Thank you, sir. At this point, we want to go ahead and close public comment. Council deliberation and direction. Members?
Mayor, Councilmember Soon here.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Christopher, I want to, you may have already been planning to do this, but if council is willing to support, given the comments that were made by Vice Mayor and Councilmember Hume, I think it'd be appropriate to do some more outreach to the community, not just the property owners whose properties would be, impacted by being put in the housing element, but perhaps the homeowners associations or neighborhood associations, just to make sure that they are fully aware of what we're doing. First of all, I don't believe affordable housing sites are necessarily, going to be a harbinger of things, bad things to come. I think there's a lot of great product out there that can get built, but in the spirit of transparency, I think folks should know, and that's what Vice Mayor Detrick and Councilmember Hume were talking about, should know what could be coming to their neighborhood. I mean, they bought in a certain area in doing due diligence, and as we're changing this area, state mandated or not, I think we just want to be, I think, extra diligent in making sure they're well informed of what's coming down the pike. And so I welcome also, the caller, Ms. Wheat, that called in about Roseville. I'm open to seeing what they did and how successful they've been. I know that throughout the SACOG region, which includes Placer County, nobody has been successful in actually building all the affordable housing sites that we've been put upon us, and it's actually one of the topics at SACOG is how do we actually get some of these things built, because just zoning them doesn't necessarily help. There's a huge financial component that drives it, and no one's been able to find the magic formula to crack that. So challenges will remain about housing affordability, as we will talk about in the next item. But at least for this housing element and what we're required to do by the state, I think it's best to get more eyes on this from our community, make sure they fully understand what our requirements are and what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
I have a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, council member.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Jordan and staff for pulling this together. And I just want to go over some numbers. So in District 1, if we're talking about existing sites right now, District 1 has 1, District 2 has 2, District 3 has 5, District 4 has 12. And Mr. Jordan talked about a balanced plan and I've heard several times, it's not concentrated in just one area. And as I look at District 4 and the 12 existing sites, they are concentrated in just one area. I look forward to having this discussion with council and how we can spread this out, because it shouldn't be that if you fall under a certain bracket or a certain income that you have to only live in this area right here, right? People should be able to have options, like we have options. And so as I look at this, and I hear you, Councilmember Detrick, but at the same token, you talk about RHNA numbers. I can tell you that the average individual, the average person doesn't know anything about RHNA numbers. They don't know about the state mandate. And so for them, when they bought the house, they were looking at the schools, they were looking at the neighborhoods, they were looking at what was surrounding around them. And it isn't until later that they are told that there's going to be a high density housing that's going to be built in right next door to you or whatnot, right? But I just want to make sure that as we're having this discussion, that we are having these all across the city as well too. And it's not just in one district, just because it's the newest district and it's the new growth area or whatnot. You talk about equity now, right? It should be. We should have folks who want to be able to live in our city have options to live in all districts, in all areas, and not just be limited to one area only. And that's all that I have, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. And I would support that probably because you and I are the only two who live in Council District 4. There seems to be an imbalance, and I would be in favor of having more of a balance across the city. And I think you hit the nail right on it, council member, having options for people. I completely agree with you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mayor, this is Vice Mayor Detrick.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
So, one thing that Sharon Anderson brought up, we don't get credit for all our northern border that's lined with high density housing. So even though within the city limits, we may not have the same number of units, but if you look actually on the northern side of our city, there's probably more units total, with the existing units in District 3 probably matches close to any other district on the number of units. So that's been one of my issues, that the city of Elk Grove gets no credit for our northern border being lined, yet we have all the problems that come with that when people come into the city from those units and cause problems that affect our PD. So I think there needs to be a bigger picture looked at than just the dots on the map.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor. Is there anyone else? All right, thank you, Mr. Jordan, for the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, so I just want to get clarification about the additional outreach, if I got council support for that.
You got my support, council member.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think you can do enough outreach, frankly. The more you talk to people and with people about this, the better.
Agreed. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Ms. Jordan, if you have enough, let's move on.
He'll be right back, because item 10.2 is to receive a report on middle income housing and provide direction on next steps.
Well, good evening again. Yes, this item is on middle income housing. So this gets to another one of the income categories. So there's a direct tie-in with the housing element update here. A little bit of background to set the stage on this item. Middle income is defined for the Sacramento area as a household earning between $43,000 and $113,000 annually. There has historically been a limited development of housing in this income range in Elk Grove, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years. It's becoming an increasing issue throughout the state, though, as well, that new housing in this income category, targeting this income category, is not being built as efficiently or as much as it should be. So this term of missing middle has been coined, and we'll talk about that more in a moment, to describe the fact that there's this income category, this housing category is missing. So last year, benefiting from a state grant, the City commissioned a report to look at this issue, both in terms of product types and household economics, and what can be done to help promote development of more middle income housing. So the term missing middle housing or missing middle development is actually a term coined by a planning and architecture firm out of the Bay Area, Opticos, who has a whole website built around this topic. And this graphic that's on the screen actually comes from their website. They've been doing some training opportunities that SACOG has been facilitating. They're a frequent presenter at planning conferences over this topic. It's a term that they pay a lot of attention to, but I think it speaks very much to the issue. And they actually define this not in exclusively the income category, but also in terms of the built form characteristics itself. So that the scale of the building, multiple units in it, embedded within a walkable neighborhood, that there's connectivity between units and between uses that create a more robust community. So you can see from the graphic in terms of the types of products this covers, you have more traditional single family detached homes on the right and left side of the graphic, which are more of your upper income categories. And then they describe it in this graphic with mid-rise, but I think we would see this more as garden style apartments that cover more of the lower income categories. And then you have everything really in between is this variety of product type from duplexes and fourplexes, courtyard products, townhomes, some multiplex developments and some stacking and even live work opportunities. So the report that's been prepared covers a number of topics, and we'll go into them as in summation as best we can, but it's divided up into 5 chapters. It looks at national housing trends as a basis for it, and then gets into particular characteristics of housing development in Sacramento County. This is a regional issue at its heart. We look at the analysis of 12 types of middle income housing over 6 housing categories. And these have densities ranging from between about 10 units an acre up to about 30 units an acre. I think it's important, our traditional single family density ranges, we see a lot of development in more the 4, 5, and 6 units per acre. We've had some development recently and continue to see some interest in the 7 unit per acre range, which is where we've been getting most of our, trying to get most of our middle income housing needs addressed, but density ranges a little bit higher are really a better target for that. And then the report goes into recommendations for facilitating middle income housing, and we'll outline those this evening and seek your direction on those. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on the demographic piece of it. You can certainly read through the report. It's up on the website. It's in the packet for this evening for folks that want to take a look at it more. There's a couple of specific items that I want to highlight as part of understanding this issue. First, there has been a mismatch between household living arrangements and housing production. Nationally, there are decreases in household sizes that are occurring. You're seeing a lot more households with 1 and 2 persons in them, and a lot more stagnation in the higher household size, the 4, 5, and 6 category. You can see that in the first chart on the right-hand side. Housing production, though, continues to focus on larger single-family homes, and the second chart here illustrates that with the trend line. It's ever-increasing percentage of single-family detached housing as a share of total housing construction that's occurring. So there's a growing number of smaller households with less opportunity for smaller housing units. They get forced more into these larger housing products that maybe they have financial issue trying to get into, so they don't get into them. They end up staying in more rental products, which then creates pressure on the lower income side to have room available for those households. So it really perpetuates this gap issue. And then Councilmember Hume mentioned in the previous item, but here's the chart in particular looking at housing production since 1968 through October of last year. You can see in this chart, it highlights in the light blue where the recessions have occurred. Those have been labeled here. So you can see in the 2008 plus range was the recession we were last in. And you can see that the housing production has not recovered to historic levels. Typically, as the recession recovery happens, we're coming out of that. There's a climb back up in production that may be sustained at some level, like it was in the mid 80s, or gets to a really big spike, and then there's a fall off that happens. But then there's a recovery, and it's a strong recovery that occurs after it. And that's not happened coming out of this prior recession. And of course, we don't have data yet on production as a result of COVID and the current economic crisis that's happening. But if that production had been where it should have been coming out of 2008, 2009, 10, there really nationally should be another 5.5 million units that have been constructed over this time period since about 2013 in inventory that are not there. And that creates a lot of pressure on housing and the ability for folks to buy in or move in or rent housing within their market capabilities. Getting more regionally, smaller housing for smaller households. 75% of middle-income households have 3 or fewer persons in them regionally, and 88% have 4 or fewer. About 33.5% of movers were in households recently with children. So the vast majority of people that have been moving recently have actually been in smaller household sizes, or 1 and 2 household sizes. And I think that lines up really well with the demographic trends about those household sizes that we see nationally. So the regional market is moving in this regard. But single family housing production, multifamily housing production has been very, very low across the region. Predominantly in Sacramento County, single family detached housing is what is constructed. The current market continues to produce this and predominantly perpetuate it. And you can see in the chart here, which breaks up the current inventory of housing as of 2017 by income category. In the middle and higher income, both of those are well over 70%, about 72% or so in the middle income category, and over 90, almost 92% in the higher income category. And you don't start to get more of a balance between housing types until you go to the lower income category, where there's a split between single family, detached, and multifamily. But single family attached is next to non-existent in all of these categories. In other markets throughout the state, there are a lot more multifamily and single family attached products that get constructed. So that is a consideration about why it's not happening here and something to think about. So more production of both smaller single family and multifamily is needed to see how the market responds. And based upon that, some consideration can occur about focusing in on product types. We're also seeing both ends of the market driving housing demand, both young and old. So there's been a lot of attraction regionally for folks in the 25 to 34 demographic. Growth in these cohorts suggests demand for smaller, affordable, often attached or multifamily housing. You see a lot of folks in this range being drawn to more midtown, downtown locations. Sort of anecdotally, we see that happening, but the data is starting to suggest that as well. And then at the other end of the cohort spectrum, you see with the baby boomers, they're beginning to downsize. That's really going to kick up into gear in the coming years. They'll be relocating potentially to where their family are across the country. And their sale of traditional single-family homes will create competition with single-family home construction, new construction that's occurring. So there'll almost be just the continual flood across the market of that housing type. And if trends continue, no production of the other product types in the market to balance that out. So then the report moves on to development feasibility. Again, we looked at 12 model prototypes. Looking at this, and the report considers, and they're outlined here on the right-hand side in the table, we look at development feasibility consisting of land cost, the cost of acquiring the land, construction cost, which includes both hard and soft costs, everything from design, fees and permits, and the actual construction, the labor and material side. And then it looks at sales value and lease rates for those product types, ultimately getting down to what's called a rate of return. What is the developer's potential return on their investment on that? For sale products, we typically look, and the report focuses on, based upon discussions our consultant team had with the industry, of a 20% IRR, or 20% return on that investment, internal rate of return. For rental products, it looks at an 8% cash on hand or cash on cash return on that product. And again, those model projects were between about 10 or 11 units per acre and 30 units per acre, which for us would be in that RD20 to RD30 zoning district range. These next couple slides give examples of the types of products that were modeled. So here are single family detached products. This will be at that lower end, about 10, 11, 12 units an acre on up to maybe about 14 or 15. On the left-hand side, you have small lot single family, which typically in these examples is a single car garage or it's a 2-car garage, either split or tandem. And these can be multi-story units. In fact, all 3 of these that are shown here are 2-story products. These lot sizes that are shown, I believe, are about 35 by 65, 35 by 70 or so. And then you also have the courtyard cluster product, which essentially takes a block of land, puts 6 units on it. These would be subdivided, so they could each be a sale product. They could just be a rental product. And these are more of an alley or drive aisle loaded product. So the garages don't directly face onto the public streets, which opens up more of the street for public parking, neighborhood parking. But then you still have the opportunity for a 2-car garage in the units. There's still private outdoor spaces that are available for each of the units, but they're essentially in the front yard, if you will, in an area where the units overlook each other. Or they're on the side of the units. You can have some private spaces there as well. The next category are single family attached. These are commonly seen with the duplex units on the left and the triplex on the right. Both of these examples that are shown here are alley or drive aisle loaded products, but all of them have garages included within the units. And then again, they provide for additional parking on streets. Since you don't have the driveways constantly, it creates more on-street parking opportunities if there's a need for that. And then each of these products can include some level of private outdoor space. You could have that in sort of a backyard or side yard component with a duplex, or you could have a balcony or some other sort of fenced area, depending on how the unit's designed in the triplex concept.
Christopher, if I
Yes,
could
sir.
pause you for just a second. This is Councilmember Hume again, and I apologize for interrupting your presentation once again, but when I think of these things, I want to talk about them. So one of the criticisms that I hear of these, what you're calling alley loaded products, particularly not so much in the single family attached you're showing here, but in the courtyard cluster, is you've essentially doubled the amount of street infrastructure, essentially, that is required to be put in to service that product. You know, basically 2 streets on either side as opposed to 1 in the middle. And have we looked at any way that we could relax city standards that would make creating those quote unquote alleys less expensive than what a full street frontage might be?
I don't have the improvement standards. I might defer to Darren Wilson on that. But typically alleys are usually a 20-foot or 22-foot width to them. So they're not the traditional 40-foot right-of-way that you would have on public streets. I think there are things we could probably look at about how we define that the primary street or the traditional neighborhood street in terms of that cross section. We still want to be able to facilitate on-street parking there so that you have a guest parking opportunity. But there could be things to look at there as well. Looking at this particular example with the courtyard cluster, I think there's a number of different ways you could probably set this up. If you have units that you probably would have units that are backing onto each other across that alley, you could bring the majority of utilities down that alley component and treat it as, so that's where the lateral infrastructure is. So you end up getting to more units on a per acre basis. And you've reduced some of the private yard spaces to do that. But certainly you are dealing with more hard construction with the concrete or asphalt that makes up those drive aisle pieces. And that certainly is a cost consideration.
And I guess that's kind of what I'm driving at, is somehow between either infrastructure requirements, setback considerations. I don't think we're going to get there with fees, but somehow you have to make this delivering this product type attractive from an economic standpoint, right, to, you know, traditional single family detached.
Right. I think one thing you could certainly look at is back on that utility front, and again, just using the courtyard cluster as an example, if those utilities are coming down the alleyways to access those units, then the public easement area, the utility easement area you would need on the street side could be lessened. And so you could actually reduce that setback from the traditional street a little bit in order to be able to increase some of your development area. You'd probably be able to easily get down to about 10 feet. And there might be ways to insert some of the SMUD infrastructure with the transformers in unique ways that that you can maintain more of that 10-foot setback as opposed to a more traditional 15 or 20-foot area. So no, they're all good points to look at. In fact, one of the recommendations we'll talk about is looking at our development standards and ways we can address that. So I'll jump over to the multifamily example products. There's essentially 3 that are in here, 2.5. The first is the row townhouse. This is differentiated by its common foundation typically, and then each structure is independently framed, so you actually end up with a little bit of airspace between, so it helps to create noise attenuation between the units. But each unit has a ground floor garage, typically 2 cars, and then you may have some small living space on the first floor. Maybe it's a guest bedroom, maybe it's an office space or some sort of entertainment area. And then on the upper floors, you would have the living space. So in the example that's shown here on the bottom of that townhouse row house graphic, these are 2 or 3 story sites products. They look like they're a common building to them, but they're owned as a townhouse would be owned in fee title for the land and the structure. And then you'd have like an HOA that would maintain the shell of the building and the roofing structure. And then on the courtyard cottages, these start to look a little bit more like a multifamily product, but they're meant to be more of integrated structures. So they're less of the traditional garden style apartments that we see sort of around in recent developments around the city. You get some more common massing across the sites. And you can see those examples in the site plans that are shown here. So this table summarizes all of the analysis and the calculations that are gone through in the report. You can dive into all the details in chapter, I believe it's 4, as well as the appendix details these assumptions out. But for each of the categories, each of the product types, it lists out some of the basic information about what the unit sizes are on average, the density for these projects, the number of units in the assumed development that's been modeled. And then it looks at what is the financial feasibility, and that's based upon that internal rate of return. So sites that are listed with a red number are negative, meaning they're not generating a positive return. Developers actually losing money on them. Depending upon that percentage of red that you're in, usually it's about 7 or 8% is the threshold. The consultants identify that possibly with some improvements through a number of avenues, maybe it's fees, maybe it's development standards, other requirements, you could actually possibly get up into a positive rate of return on that project. But then but from a percentage basis, you see many of these units, particularly in the single family detached category, you don't hit that 20% magic number that's been identified as really the targets. When you get up higher into the single family attached and multifamily, you do see that IRR, that internal rate of return, breaking 20% and making that project financially feasible. But because we're looking at both ends of this equation, the bottom of the table looks at the percent affordable. That's the penetration into the middle income market for these units. So how affordable could this unit be to the spectrum of market that's that 43,000 to 100,000+ household income? And what we see across this is none of the products, with the exception of one, break 50%. And even that one that breaks 50% of the market is just barely. But the majority of them are in that 30 to 40% range where they're affordable to about 30 to 40%, 30 to 50% of the market, of the middle income market. So we don't get the wide spectrum. There's still a reliance upon, well, maybe more traditional low income apartments and rental units as an opportunity to house some of those that are more middle income households. So some of the findings that the report summarizes on the calculations, and generally products most similar to traditional apartments had the highest rate of return. Only one product was affordable to at least 50% of households, but it was unprofitable. And again, the balance of those modeled products did not achieve at least half of the market penetration. And then a majority of the middle income households could not afford to purchase them. So there's a couple of conclusions that the report comes to that we summarize. Essentially, absent public subsidies, the need for most middle income households will have to be adjusted through the market of existing housing and multifamily development. And then that facilitating new middle income housing has the potential to lure some middle income households out of existing housing and into new housing. So help to create that opportunity for move up housing. So there are 6 recommendations that come out of the report. Give me a moment here. The first one looks at establishing better development standards, more development standards for small lot middle income housing. So at densities above 10 units per acre, we typically just leave it to a design review process. We figure it out when the project gets submitted, which gives us a lot of flexibility to figure out what ought to occur. But if we actually create development standards, we pre-program those into the code or into some sort of standards or guideline book, then we're not looking at them on a case-by-case basis. It creates a lot more streamlined ability, something for the market to be able to respond to more effectively. So we'd be looking at updating the zoning code, design guidelines, and other documents to improve the predictability for future development. The second recommendation is about landscaping and open space standards. Right now we have open space landscape standards that apply universally to single family residential. If we bifurcated that out into different product types, so there were different expectations of open space across lots based upon whether it's the density or the product type, that would give more flexibility to the development. The third one is looking at limiting unit sizes. So right now what we see, and I didn't pull the data up, but it's in chapter 2, I believe, that looks at there have been increases in the price of housing has gone up, but the cost per square footage has stayed relatively the same or decreased a bit over the course of time. So what ends up happening is there's just by the natural happenstance of the market, there's a lot more ability to, you can get a better, more financial windfall from a larger product, but it's not costing you as much to build on a per square foot basis. So what we could look at is ways, particularly in some of the residential districts, about limiting the unit sizes as part of initial construction as ways to help control for that. The third recommendation is on fee reductions. So this would look at our fee programs like the roadway fee program, capital facilities fee, and others, and start to differentiate between the types of residential that were built. Right now, we treat single family universally the same, regardless of its density or product size. And then we separate out multifamily, and you have to have at least, I think it's 3 or 4 attached units in order to be called multifamily. So we could actually look at it instead on a per square foot basis or on a per lot size basis and differentiate that out. We've started doing that analysis and are working towards a recommendation for you early next year on an update to the roadway fee program, as will be the first one with this that will consider these different categories based upon lot size. And I can show that example table of what we're thinking that would look like later if you'd like. The fifth recommendation is an expansion of first-time homebuyer program to include middle-income households. Typically, we look more, existing programs look traditionally more at lower-income households. We could look at ways to expand that and what available federal, state, and other grant programs may be available to do that. So the last recommendation is for regional action that we could leverage SACOG and the other cities and counties across the region to work together collaboratively. And I think we would also absolutely need to include folks like BIA in that conversation. What are things we could do from a standards perspective? What are things we could do from a marketing perspective? And other actions we could take to move the region forward overall to make sure this income category is not left behind. I want to highlight briefly outreach we've done on this effort thus far. Our consultant did interviews with a couple of developers early on in the process to understand the Elk Grove markets, what their construction costs have looked like, and other factors to consider. The draft report was presented to the industry working group in February and March. We received feedback. You have one comment letter in the packet this evening from a member of the industry working group that speaks to the item. That concludes staff's presentation. Available for questions.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mayor, I have some questions.
Councilmember Sun.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher. Again, very good presentation. There's a lot of information that we can dive into. Maybe we will. I wanted to ask about in this report. I think is I'm glad to see it. My questions regarding the assumptions in there. The land acquisition numbers, the fee components, sales pricing used to inform the modeling and the resultant, IRRs you were getting in there. All those things, are they, I know they're from around the region, Citrus Heights, Elk Grove, et cetera, but I just want to ensure, and everyone else to hear whether like these are apples to apples, like the sales pricing and things. Did you guys shop the communities here? Are these fee components representative of our fees? Some of them seem low to me. So maybe if you could touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So table A7, which is on page A11 of the report, or page 113 of your packet, details out the assumptions that were used. I won't go into all the details, but I'll touch on a couple of points. In terms of the development fees, these are based upon Elk Grove fees. They pulled our development fee impact book in order to pull that. So they're specifically including things like building permit costs, capital facilities fee, roadway fee, Measure A, the I-5 sub-regional fee, fire and parks fees, Elk Grove Unified School District fee. Other fees that would typically be assessed for water, sewer, and drainage, they have attempted to include that within the land value cost. So it's not exactly an apples to apples way of doing it, but it is a way to calculate that and include it and sort of rectify it. And since the water, sewer, and drainage fees are, the water and sewer in particular, are common across the county, for at least within Sac County Water Agency or the SASD service area, that makes a little bit of sense to do it that way. For the other jurisdictions, there are some calculations that they've done on that, but I think they've used Elk Grove numbers as a benchmark for them, if I'm reading the language correctly, which for some fee categories, our numbers would be higher. So you'd actually have a potential for a little bit more feasibility in some of those jurisdictions than the report might explicitly call for. Land acquisition costs are based upon vacant land sales by zoning in the previous 12-month period. So there was data they collected on that. And then sales and rent data is again based on a prior 12-month period where they collected data for that. So again, that's table A7 that details out those assumptions.
Okay, thank you. And then are there any considerations for backbone infrastructure or CFD to support offsite infrastructure, or these performers assume that everything's built right up to the lot?
So that would be captured in some regard through the development fee components, since those can vary quite wildly between jurisdictions. They've not tried to differentiate it out between the different models. It's just sort of equalized in. The intent here wasn't to give a specific pro forma for an exact site in the community. Rather, it was more to look at more on average, what are the economic headwinds to getting these sorts of projects built, and what are areas the city can focus on in order to try to address the deficiency.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you, CJ. I think this is, Christopher, I think I only bring this up because, and you and I have talked before this meeting, but there's an inherent amount of uncertainty, in this report. As good as it is, I think it's a great step forward and very informative, but there is a lot of uncertainty that remains. So we have to keep that in mind as we look at these numbers. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, council member.
So, Mr. Jordan, I saw on the very first slide, what was labeled as middle income was anything starting from 43 to 113,000. Is that correct? I'm wondering where you got those numbers from, because I know that is not considered middle income to 43,000.
That's the number that is used in the report. I don't recall what the household size that went along with that, if it's a 4-person household or not. I'd have to double check that for you.
Okay. I mean, I'd probably, we probably want to double check that, because I'm pretty sure that's considered low income housing. And I just wanted to get clarification on where that number came from. And, Councilmember Soon and I know Councilmember Hume had asked a couple of questions. And one of the things, as Councilmember Hume was bringing up one of the slides earlier, and I know we're trying to limit unit size, but one of the areas which I heard you say was a tandem garage and one of those. And I can tell you that I lived in a home with a tandem garage and I absolutely hated it. It was very inconvenient for me, because depending on who needed to leave first in the morning and who came home late, you'd have to move cars and back cars out. And what I ended up doing was just using the furthest in as storage and then just parking the car outside. And so I caution us as we look into tandem garage, and I know there are a few here in our city, and if we can kind of take a look to see if that's even something that we want to consider building more in our city. You know, this is a lot to consider tonight. I tried to read through everything and I tried to look through everything, and I don't know if other council members had the same issue as me, maybe because I'm the newest member of the council, but it was really, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in tonight. It's a lot to go through. And I'm wondering if, I mean, I have some ideas, but I'll stop there so that way other council members can chime in and see how we can move forward with this.
Yeah, if I can pick up right where Councilmember Nguyen left off, Mr. Mayor, it is a lot, and it's a lot for somebody who's been in this business for over 20 years. This is a nut that has been tried to be cracked, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, we used to be better at it than we are now. And I think a lot of that is, you know, take any craft industry, whether it's home building, whether it is ranching, farming, you know, producing whatever. And that's one of the downsides of the industrialized, capitalized world, is that big business comes in and figures out a way how to maximize profit with minimize brain damage. And so whereas we used to have a variety of housing product put forward simply because there was a variety of people with ideas of what they wanted to build and do, it's now gotten to the point where it is pretty much you don't reinvent the wheel, because it shrinks your margin down. It increases your, as I said, brain damage, or the amount of headaches that go along with it. And frankly, regulations and lawsuits just discourage such creativity. And so as we look at how we're going to try and encourage this type of housing, and that's really all we can do is set the table. You know, I mentioned some of the things that I think are going to have to be on the table with respect to infrastructure costs, setbacks, landscape requirements, some of the codes that we may have to lobby to get some relief. You know, the increase in regulations that have been happening recently. But then there's another piece of this, and I just thought of this as Councilmember Soon was making his comment, is part of the aversion is risk and the inability to procure financing for a project that has a dubious rate of return, or you know, is more expensive or more challenging in a market where you could do something that's, you know, maybe lower hanging fruit. And so I would think as we you know, increase our banking relationships with some of these local banks through our RISE program, if there's a way to somehow help developers who would be inclined to think outside the box, help them bridge that financing gap so that they are able, so it's a shared risk where maybe the city is throwing in a little, the developer's throwing in a little, and the financing is throwing in a little to say, look, we have to break this cellophane and prove the concept before it becomes you know, a common practice. And so this is in no way going to be solved tonight. And frankly, I don't know that we will solve it, but we're certainly putting forward the effort. But I think, again, if you go back and look at some of those charts that Christopher showed early on in the slide deck, and what I mentioned on the previous item, you know, a lot of affordability and a lot of variety happens with a constraint in demand. And so the more we crank down and prohibit the availability of new stock, we're exacerbating an already existing problem. And I think one of the encouraging outcomes, if you will, of both the pandemic as well as some of the civil unrest is I think you're going to see people who will want more of that city type lifestyle of not necessarily maintaining a yard or an outdoor space, and may or may not want that garage that Councilmember Nguyen referenced was so inconvenient, but don't necessarily want to live in a city. And so I think there's a possibility for cities like Elk Grove to bring that lifestyle element to parts of our city particularly Project Elevate. There's probably some opportunities down in Old Town. Who knows if within SEPA and the little horseshoe area, if there isn't an ability to create that different sort of housing stock, but we've got to do it. We can't solve 21st century problems with 20th century thinking, and so we've got to figure out how we basically, throw the spaghetti at the wall and think outside the box and think bigger, and then we can whittle down the crazy ideas into something that's more manageable. But we can't, I don't think we can get there from looking at it, how do we do what we're doing differently? We have to look at how do we create something that's different, more attainable. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation, and trust me, Councilmember Nguyen, don't feel like you can't digest that report because you're new on council. It is a conundrum that people have been scratching their heads about for a long time.
Anyone else?
Yes, Vice Mayor Detrick.
Go ahead.
First of all, CJ, I know how much you put into all this, and the institutional knowledge that you have is unbelievable. And Jason, we got to do everything we can to make sure we keep Christopher Jordan here for as long as he's going to continue to be working. But with that, I agree. This is a big piece of information to digest. And, I know that the issue's been brought up by a couple of different council members on the stacked garages too, for various reasons. I've never been a supporter of that because I think that actually increases your on-street parking, because exactly what was mentioned by Councilmember Nguyen, that it causes you to, instead of juggling cars all the time, I could see possibly, instead of having a 3-car side-by-side, that maybe you have a 2-car with one tandem. That way, if somebody had a boat, they could have the boat in the back, or if they want to make it for storage or something. But to have a single-car garage, double stacked, I think that's a horrible idea. I think looking outside the box, I think, we continue to use our industry group as experts in the industry, in looking, not just around the region, but look around the United States for all the different types of housing options that we could possibly have here that would make sense geographically, the weather that we have, all those kind of variables. But anyway, I look forward to more to come. That's it.
All right. Anyone else?
Mayor, if I could, I wanted to add on and maybe propose something too, which is, Christopher, the recommendations you outlined, I would like, if council support, maybe we should do some working groups around these, obviously include the industry. But this will, I think, as everybody had mentioned, this is a very complex issue. There's a lot to take in. And I think having the industry working group at the table, and I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Hume mentioned about the financing. They're a big part of this puzzle. Having them at the table as well, to inform folks and talk about their risks, really come at it from a partnership level. It's actually something that the state's been trying to do as well as SACOG in these conversations. So I think we in the city have an opportunity to maybe blaze some trails here on our own if we have willing partners, especially our local community banks, like Councilmember Hume mentioned. But I think having these working groups to focus in on these areas, let's set the design guidelines. Let's make those more robust and maybe make that more of a issue or a guideline that we can implement up front, so we're not imposing design guidelines, that tentative map. I would agree with my colleagues. I'm not sold on the tandem garages either, but I recognize the problem you're trying to solve when you have a narrow lot and you don't want the whole face of the house to be all garage, but still accommodate 2 cars. So what does that look like my point is, if we have a discussion about design guidelines and the actual products that we want to see in the city, then we can talk about how to incentivize it. So the alley loaded product that you mentioned, Councilmember Hume identified, like there's a double cost there, the street frontage and the alley loads. Maybe one solution is maybe half that alley is part of our fee program for that type of product, something along those lines. But anyway, those are the types of conversations that can happen in these working groups. And so I'd encourage, and we want to do this. I don't think we want this to linger on for years. I think it's something we want to move relatively quickly on. But right away, let's start setting up some more deeper conversations around this and see what we can, what we can come to, having all the parties at the table. Thanks.
So, Mr. Jordan, I want to thank you for the presentation. My thought here is maybe, for future items, maybe breaking this down a little bit more, because, like other council members, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. But I did want to, offer this. I have a 3-car garage, and I have 3 cars, and none of them are in my 3-car garage. So I think the truth of it is that I like different options. And I want to, keep those options available and open. But at the end of the day, it's going to be whatever the market demands. I am not so adverse against, certain types of lots or garages or what have you. But I am certainly interested in exploring different choices and different options for the community, and not necessarily wanting to preclude anything from the get-go. So those are my thoughts. Is there anything else?
I like the working group idea. Thank you, Councilmember.
Pardon me, Council. I would just like to put out there that we do have some callers that are interested in providing public comment on the item, in addition to those 3 written comments that were received and distributed to the council prior to 4 p.m. today at the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Lindgren, for reminding us. So that being the case, let's go ahead and open for public comment, and let's have the speakers chime in.
And our staff were pulling
Caller,
folks together. Here we are.
We have our first caller on the line. You may go ahead.
Defines middle-income housing as walkable neighborhoods with 10 to 30 units per acre. There are no such neighborhoods in established areas of Elk Grove. These proposals are de novo plans for brand new neighborhoods, which quite frankly mimic the isolated and impoverished affordable housing projects that Elk Grove has and continues to pursue in its public housing policies. 2 months ago, PG&E was convicted of 84 murders. Housing is a basic human need that keeps our resident citizens safe from the elements of nature, the heat, the cold, the rain, the wind, dust, insects, and wild animals. Housing enables the individual family and the household to cook, to store food, to keep tools of leisure, to become fully human, like musical instruments, books, and space to entertain and commune with each other. When the United Nations was created in 1948, it included housing in its Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 84 murder convictions in June 2020 against PG&E. Its CEO confessed to 84 murders for the Campfire in Paradise, California in 2018. We all face mass foreclosures and evictions due to the collapse of the economy, widespread unemployment, and lost workers' incomes because of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. Nobody went to jail. Nobody at PG&E went to jail, but thousands became homeless. I propose that the city create a committee of citizens to work with Ms. Bontrager to align the city's housing policies with the precepts delineated in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Without such effort, we stand to deny our fellow citizens adversely affected by this natural disaster their rights to safe and affordable housing. Pacific Gas and Electric is still a chartered corporation. Many residents declined rebuilding homes in Paradise. That concludes my remarks.
And thank you, Speaker. And we will patch through our next speaker on item 10.2.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Timothy Denham. I'm a principal in charge of urban design and planning at Wood Rogers, an engineering, planning, and surveying firm based out of Sacramento, and we do a lot of work with developers and builders in the Elk Grove area and elsewhere in the region. I'd like to start by saying that, the middle income or workforce housing is a very important topic. I commend the cities and the staff's efforts on this issue. It is complex. It is challenging to figure out. I do have a few comments for your consideration. On page 3 of staff report and in the presentation, it talks about a mismatch within the city of Elk Grove. But, attractively designed single-family homes are selling well, although below historical averages, as Councilmember Hume pointed out. The market's still fragile. The report also talks about person per household factors, and Elk Grove is holding steady at 3.2 persons per household for both single-family and multifamily, which is quite different and distinct from the national and state averages. It illustrates that the city is, a family-oriented market. There's also a graph or a chart in that table 12 that illustrates that single-family home sizes are trending upwards, and multifamily homes are also trending upwards, perhaps flattening. One issue I kind of want to comment on was on page 7 of the staff report, the idea of limiting unit sizes. I think this is a bad idea. Builders have to operate in a free market and design a product based, on buyers and renters, and hopefully they've researched it thoroughly and they're able to sell and rent at the end of the day. Imposing a maximum square footage would impact, I think, the housing supply. It could impact sales, and it in a way is an attempt to impose an additional housing fee. So the city should continue to use their housing fees paid by the market rate units to subsidize construction of high density housing and affordable units, as well as fee reductions, which was mentioned.
1 minute remains.
Okay, thank you. Last comment would be, there are ways to design two-car garage, conventional garages that are attractive on smaller lots, and I think architects can solve that issue. And lastly, just like to close, I'd like to be involved if there's any stakeholder outreach meetings, in the design guidelines going forward. If I could be on a notification list, I would appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Speaker. And for item 10.2, we have 2 more speakers that are signed up to speak as we go back to, I'm reviewing over my systems, but we'll be patching through. We have 2 more speakers to come forward.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Good evening again, Mayor Lee, members of City Council. My name is John Gilday with the North State Building Industry Association. I sent you all an email earlier this afternoon where I detailed some concerns regarding some of the information in the staff report. I won't go into specifics here, but here's some broad concerns in case you weren't able to read the message. We've been involved in the industry working group where concerns regarding smaller lot sizes have been raised, including tandem garages that other members of City Council have brought up tonight. These have largely not been accepted within the Sacramento region, and there may be impacts to the community that may not be addressed in the report, such as decreased livable space in the first floor, which could eliminate a potential bedroom, increased greenhouse gas emissions by cold starting cars that swap them out based on work schedules, or just congesting streets if residents don't want to deal with tandem parking altogether. We also implore you to take into account the information provided in the staff report. For instance, similar to Councilmember Nguyen, we had similar concerns with the household income ranges. Also, the report shows findings that indicate a mismatch between household living arrangements and housing production. As it stands, Elk Grove has a higher number of residents in the household than the state average, so low-density residential may be a better fit for the city. Also, staff recommendation 3 is to limit the sizes in residential 10 to residential 30 zones, and it may be better to let the market dictate the proper size. We understand that Elk Grove is home to many families and it's a family-oriented community, and we would like not to see constraints with the guidelines to make it harder to build. Finally, I wanted to address some challenges that you may face while attempting to address this missing middle, namely fees and other costs of building that may not be fully considered here today, including the time that it takes to process the project. We hope to participate in the working groups to help make housing creation more affordable in Elk Grove, including the fee reductions, which was staff recommendation number 4. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your comments. That'll take us on to our next speaker under item 10.2.
Caller, you may go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Lynn Wheat again. I read the staff report. In my observations in Elk Grove and what I've heard from several residents, baby boomers are aging in place after looking at smaller homes within Elk Grove, determined that it was not worth moving because of high assessments that can be increased by city council on a yearly basis. It is much more cost saving for them to remain in their current home. Or the younger boomers, some of my friends, have retired and left the state, taking their home equity and retirement with them. The developers are not willing to build inclusionary housing because it is so much easier for them to pay our low fees. Yes, low fees. We've made it a very easy choice. The suggestion of lowering the fees for smaller homes will not be sufficient enough to tip the scale to building more affordable housing without additional subsidies. The economics is just not there without a mandate for inclusionary housing like Roseville. Somehow Roseville found a way to make it work. We can do better, and we deserve better. And since writing my comments, I have a couple other things that I'd like to say. Councilman Soon, with an inclusionary housing policy, the housing developers are required to build them. All new residential projects have to dedicate units, low and moderate, through deed restrictions. So indeed, the units would be built. Councilmember Hume, relaxed standards. This bothers me. Relaxed standards. Let's look at the Civic Center apartments and their relaxed standards, or drive through some of the recently approved projects. Take a look at them and their relaxed standards. We have our special parking permit, which eliminated parking for visitors. We keep forgetting that we're providing homes for Bay Area commuters. I recently walked a neighborhood where one residential area home was expanded the driveway to 4 parking spots. Reduced fees, we can't have that. That's not going to work for us. Lowering the development standards more, not going to work for us. Again, we can do better and we deserve better. As far as these meetings, if we're going to include the industry working group who tends to lead the way for what our city is going to look like, then I would ask that you consider including residents who live here, who invest here, who want to live here. This is how we can come up with creative solutions to addressing all of the needs within our city. Let's not be led by the developers. Let's not have them speaking from our dais. Let's hear from the residents. Let's have representatives that represent the residents speaking for our dais. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and that'll conclude the public speakers under item 10.2.
All right, thank you, folks. Let's go ahead and close public comment. Council deliberation and direction. Anything additional, members?
Well, can we just review what we agreed upon about working groups?
Yeah, I support that. I would like for us to do some working groups.
Agreed.
And I think it's good to talk about, the type of products that we like. We still will let the market drive things, but, the challenges of the, the alley loaded product, I think it's a worthwhile conversation. And then including, obviously, the finance industry and, other stakeholders too, maybe a few of the community that would like to see certain products built. I think it could be a worthwhile conversation all the way around. This policy, I just close out by this policy, could end up changing the face of Elk Grove going forward. So I think it's really important that we take the time to have these conversations and find a way to make it work for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, Vice Mayor Detrick, I agree. Do it once and do it right. Let's take the and continue with the outreach and bring all the stakeholders from every segment of the community and development world and come up with a better plan.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, do you have enough?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add one thing, that as we go forward with this, I think it's important that we also include industry matter experts for things like the Department of Real Estate, insurance providers, subdivision consultants, people who know the ramifications of zero lot lines, light and air easements, all of these different things that might come into play as we try and figure out how to make this go forward, what that does not only from a liability standpoint for the builder, but from a cost and insurable standpoint for the homeowner, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to have information of sort of the pros and cons of different ideas vetted as we go forward on this.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move to the next item.
That'll take us to the last item on the agenda, item 10.3, which is designation of voting delegates and alternates to the 2020 League of California Cities Annual Conference. Brief item. This is for whoever's available to make it to the annual business meeting. The conference is scheduled for October 7th through the 9th. I think the league has been sending out these notices on their old schedule. I'm sure that what they will be moving towards is a teleconference environment as they move forward in this item, but they've been keeping to their prior deadlines. And so it would just be the question of who's available for more than likely a teleconference opportunity on October 9th as the delegate, and then whether we want to designate any alternates.
Mr. Mayor, I have never volunteered before. I will volunteer this year.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Hume. We've got one. Who's your alternate? Any other volunteers?
Unfortunately, I can't. I've been the one attending, but I cannot because I've got a training that Friday all day. So whenever you two are going to have to step up.
Vice Mayor Detrick, are you available?
Come on, Vice Mayor. It's your last one.
All right. I'll bite the bullet.
All right. Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Hume. That being the case, we don't need a motion on this or a vote on this.
Just a quick confirmation to touch base. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on item 10.3, just for general public comment on the item.
Okay. Then let's go ahead and officially open and close public comments. And all right, we have the delegate as Councilmember Hume and the alternate as Vice Mayor Detrick. That being the case, very well. Let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 9:27 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.